Welcome to Mia Horror Stories. To make it easier on your eyes, this video plays against a black screen, so you can close your eyes, get comfortable, and let the story take over. But don't relax too much, the ending might just catch you off guard. Stay with me until the very last word. The first strange thing was that the basement door was open. Not wide, maybe 2 inches, just enough for a thin strip of yellow light to lie across the kitchen floor, cutting through the blue-gray evening like somebody had drawn it there with a ruler. I stood in the mudroom with one boot off and the other still tied, listening to the old house settle around me. The refrigerator hummed. Rain ticked against the window over the sink. Somewhere inside the wall, a pipe gave a quick metallic knock. Then something moved below me. A light scrape. Pause. Another scrape. "Cooper," I called. The dog beside me lifted his head. That was the part that bothered me. Cooper was right there. He was a heavy golden retriever with a whitening muzzle, sitting on the rubber mat beside my wet boot, looking toward the kitchen with the same mild confusion I felt. His tags clicked once when he tilted his head. The sound from the basement stopped. I told myself it was the furnace, or a mouse, or one of the plastic storage bins shifting on a concrete floor, because the house was old. The weather had turned, and buildings made noises. I had watched enough dogs in enough unfamiliar homes to know how quickly ordinary sounds could become personal when you were alone. Still, I didn't cross the kitchen right away. My name is Mara Ellis. I'm 26 years old, and I'm a woman, though at that moment I felt closer to 12. I was standing in a borrowed house in North Stamford, Connecticut, with rainwater dripping from my coat and an 80-pound dog pressed against my knee, trying to decide whether to close a door I was specifically told not to use. I had agreed to stay for 6 nights because my rent was due. My checking account was down to $83, and the homeowners were paying $450 in cash. The basement door gave a soft creak and opened another inch. Cooper backed into me. "Okay," I whispered. "That's probably air pressure." I didn't know why I whispered. There was no one else in the house, according to the owners anyway. I stepped out of my remaining boot and approached the door in damp socks. The kitchen smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and cooked onions, a warm domestic smell that didn't match the sight of the basement stairs descending into shadow. A bare bulb burned at the bottom, visible through the gap. It made the wooden railing cast narrow bars against the cinder block wall. I reached for the brass knob. Cooper made a low sound behind me, not a growl, more like a complaint caught in his throat. "It's fine," I said, mostly because I wanted him to believe it. The knob was cool. The door moved easily until something on the other side stopped it. I pushed again, gently. Whatever was blocking it dragged across the floor with the same scraping sound I'd heard when I came in. A cardboard box. That was all. When I opened the door far enough to see, I found a medium-sized moving box sitting on the top landing. One of its flaps had come loose and was wedged beneath the door. Printed across the side in fading black marker were the words "Winter Dog Things." Normal, completely normal. The box had probably been left too close to the door. The furnace had kicked on. The pressure had moved the door, and the flap had scraped across the floor. Explanation found. Problem solved. I bent to push the box back with my foot, but a sheet of white paper taped to the inside of the basement door caught my eye. At the top, in careful block letters, it said, "Basement rules. Please read before going down." I almost laughed. The house already had instructions everywhere. A laminated card by the alarm panel, a sticky note on the coffee machine, 2 pages on the refrigerator explaining Cooper's feeding schedule, medications, preferred walking route, and tendency to steal dish towels when anxious. Basement rules were probably about a temperamental water heater or a fuse box installed before modern building codes. I leaned closer. The first few lines were exactly that. 1. Keep the basement door shut when not in use. 2. Do not place boxes on the top 3 steps. 3. The dehumidifier must remain plugged in. Then, 4. If you hear scratching from the laundry room, check that the exterior bulkhead is locked. Raccoons sometimes shelter near the doors. Still normal. Then, number 5. 5. Do not let Cooper follow you downstairs. I glanced back at him. He had moved into the dining room and was watching me around the corner. Below that was number 6. 6. If Baxter is already in the basement, do not call him upstairs. Close the door and text Daniel. For several seconds, I just stared. The handwriting changed on that line. The first 5 rules were written in blue ink. Number 6 was in black, pressed harder into the paper, the letters narrower. Baxter. There was no Baxter in the instructions upstairs. There was no second dog in the house. I read the line again, then took out my phone and opened the message thread with the homeowner. My screen showed 1 bar of service, then 2, then 1 again. North Stamford wasn't exactly wilderness, but the road had curved through wooded lots for the last 10 minutes of the drive, past stone walls slick with rain, and houses set so far back that their porch lights looked suspended between trees. Before I could type, Cooper barked. 1 sharp blast. I jerked and nearly dropped the phone. A car door slammed outside. Cooper barked again, then ran toward the front hall, nails skittering on the hardwood. I closed the basement door harder than I meant to and heard the box scrape back against it. Someone knocked twice. "Mara," a man called through the glass beside the front door. "It's Daniel. Sorry, forgot the garage clicker." I let out a breath through my nose. Of course. The homeowners had left less than 20 minutes earlier. They were probably still nearby. I crossed the hall and opened the door. Daniel Mercer was 43 years old and a man, tall but slightly folded through the shoulders, as if he spent most of his day leaning toward computer screens. Rain darkened the front of his green jacket. His sandy hair was wet and stuck flat on one side, and he held his car keys in one hand and a paper coffee cup in the other. I had met him earlier during the house tour, but he seemed different now that his wife wasn't standing beside him. More distracted, less polished. "Sorry," he said. "I swear we've been preparing for this trip for 2 weeks, and somehow I forgot the one thing that opens the garage." "No problem." Cooper pushed between us, tail moving hard enough to strike the wall. Daniel scratched behind the dog's ears. "You miss me already? That's embarrassing." His smile looked natural, tired, but natural. I stepped back to let him in. The basement door was open when I got here, His hand stopped on Cooper's neck, only for a moment. Was it? Just a little. There was a box behind it. Oh, he nodded too quickly. Yeah, that happens. Floor slopes. He walked toward the kitchen, leaving drops from his shoes across the wood. I followed, aware that the house no longer felt empty and that this should have made me relax. It didn't. Daniel opened a drawer beside the refrigerator, rummaged through batteries, pens, and a roll of painter's tape, then found a black garage remote. You saw the rules then? He asked without looking at me. The basement rules. Right. Who's Baxter? The drawer stopped halfway closed. Rain rattled harder against the window. The gutter outside overflowed in a thin stream, tapping the aluminum siding. Daniel shut the drawer. Old dog, he said. Old as in he died. The answer came cleanly. No hesitation that time. I looked toward the basement door. When? Daniel rubbed the edge of the garage remote with his thumb. 4 years ago, almost 5. For a second, neither of us said anything. Then he gave a small, embarrassed laugh. That note should have been taken down. Probably. It's not what it sounds like. I don't know what it sounds like. Fair point. He set his coffee on the counter and went to the basement door. Cooper stayed where he was, standing beside my leg. Daniel opened the door bent and moved the box away from the landing. There, he said. That was the scraping. I figured. He examined the sheet of rules. His face did something I couldn't quite name. Not fear, more like irritation mixed with recognition. The expression you make when you find an old photograph in the wrong drawer. My wife wrote most of this, he said. The Baxter rule is different handwriting. Daniel looked at me. I wished immediately that I hadn't said it. It sounded accusatory, like I had been inspecting their house for evidence instead of being there to feed a dog and sleep in the guest room. But Daniel only nodded. That part was mine. Why would Baxter be in the basement? He used to hide down there during thunderstorms. I glanced at Cooper. And you didn't want people calling him up. He had arthritis. The stairs were steep. If he came up too fast, he'd slip. That was reasonable. Everything he said was reasonable. Daniel peeled at one corner of the page, but the tape resisted and began tearing the paper. He stopped. Leave it, I said. It's fine. No, it's confusing. It's your basement. Exactly. Which means I should have cleaned it up. He smiled again, but it was thinner now. The explanation made sense. An old instruction sheet. A dead dog. A rule nobody remembered to remove. Houses held onto things. Notes, spare keys, medicine bottles, names written inside winter coats. People didn't erase every trace of a life just because it had ended. I understood that better than most. My father had died when I was 19, and my mother still kept his voicemail greeting on their old landline for 3 years afterward. I used to call the house when I knew she wasn't home just to hear him say we couldn't come to the phone. I had never told anyone that. Not my mother. Not the therapist I saw twice and then stopped seeing because she asked questions in a gentle voice that made me angry. That was my private flaw, though I would have called it something else then. I held on too long, to people, to explanations, to things that had already finished. I mistook attention for control. If I studied a loss hard enough, maybe it would stop being one. Daniel pulled his phone from his pocket. I should tell Rachel we're delayed another 5 minutes, or she'll assume I drove into a tree. As though summoned by her name, Daniel's phone rang. The screen showed Rachel. He answered on speaker while searching his jacket pockets. "Found it," he said. Rachel Mercer was 41 years old and a woman, a public school administrator with the kind of brisk voice that made every sentence sound halfway to becoming a checklist. I had met her during the tour as well. She had worn black slacks, running shoes, and a silver watch she checked constantly. Even over the phone, I could picture her standing beside their loaded SUV, counting bags. "Where was it?" she asked. "Kitchen drawer. The drawer I told you it was in. The very one." There was a pause. "Mara's still there." "I'm here," I said. "Hi, Mara. Sorry about this." "Cooper had his dinner, correct?" "Not yet. You said 6:30. "Perfect. And one tablet with the food. The white bottle, not the amber one." "I remember." "Daniel, please don't make her nervous by hovering." "Retrieving an object from my own home. You hover when you retrieve things." Daniel rolled his eyes, but there was affection in it. "Habit 2. Rachel continued, "Mara, the basement's off limits unless there's a breaker issue. Everything you need is upstairs." Daniel looked at the rules sheet. I said, "The door was open when I arrived," but Daniel explained it. Another pause, short, barely there. "The door was open?" Rachel asked. "Box caught behind it," Daniel said. "I moved it. You need to latch it." "I will. Not just close it, latch it." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Yes, Rachel." Cooper wandered to the doorway, saw the open stairs, and stopped. He did not approach Daniel. He lowered his head and sniffed the air, slow and careful. Rachel said something muffled to another person, possibly at the car rental place, then came back. "Mara, I'm sorry. We're being strange. We had a pipe burst down there 2 winters ago. And now I obsess about the door because Cooper got into insulation while the wall was open. No worries. There's nothing dangerous down there now, just clutter." Daniel turned away from the phone and looked into the basement. From below came a heavy thump. One sound, solid and dull, like a book dropped flat. Cooper retreated so quickly his back feet slipped. Daniel moved before I did. He pulled the door shut and lifted a small brass hook mounted on the frame, fitting it into an eye screw on the door. The latch. I hadn't noticed it earlier. Rachel's voice sharpened through the phone. "What was that?" "Nothing," Daniel said. "The dehumidifier probably cycled." "That was not the dehumidifier." Daniel took the phone off speaker and held it to his ear. I stood with Cooper pressed against my legs, his body warm and trembling faintly through my jeans. The kitchen light flickered once, not dramatically, just the quick dip that happens when an appliance draws power. Daniel listened to his wife. His eyes remained on the basement door. "No," he said quietly. "I'm not checking." Another pause. I said, "I'm not checking. We're already late." He ended the call without saying goodbye. The gesture changed the room more than the noise had. He put his phone away. "Old house. Right. The shelving down there is overloaded. Things fall." "Sure." He picked up his coffee and garage remote, then headed for the mudroom. At the doorway, he stopped. "Mara, yeah, if the power goes out, the breaker panel is in the basement." I waited. He looked at Cooper, then back at me. "There are flashlights in the top drawer by the refrigerator. Call me before you go down." "That part of the rules?" "No." His mouth shifted like he almost smiled. parts knew he left. A few seconds later, the front door closed, and his car moved down the wet driveway, tires hissing over fallen leaves. I fed Cooper at 6:30. One tablet from the white bottle crushed into wet food the way Rachel had shown me. He ate around it twice before swallowing. I washed the bowl, made instant noodles, and sat at the kitchen table while the rain softened. For nearly an hour, nothing happened. The basement door stayed shut. The latch stayed fastened. Cooper slept beneath the table with one paw over his nose, twitching occasionally as he dreamed. I began to feel foolish. Not relieved exactly, but embarrassed by how much attention I had given an old note and a badly placed box. At 8:12, the Wi-Fi went out. My phone switched to one bar of cellular service. The television froze on a weather map, then displayed a connection error. Outside, the wind pushed wet branches against the roof with a fibrous scraping sound. At 8:14, the kitchen lights went off. The refrigerator stopped humming. The entire house settled into the flat gray darkness of a stormy evening, with only my phone screen shining against the tabletop. Cooper woke and stood. From behind the basement door came a small electronic chirp. Then another. The smoke detector, I thought, or the dehumidifier alarm. My phone showed a text from Daniel, sent 11 minutes earlier, but only now delivered. Storms worse near the parkway. If breaker trips, reset switch 12. Don't take Cooper down. Call first. I tapped his number. The call failed. I tried again. Failed. The electronic chirping continued below us, regular and patient. Cooper walked to the basement door and sniffed the narrow gap beneath it. His tail hung still. Then, from somewhere down the stairs, came the sound of a collar tag tapping against metal. Once, twice, a familiar, ordinary noise. Cooper's collar had stopped moving. I switched on my phone flashlight and looked at the brass latch. The house was losing heat. The refrigerator held Cooper's medication. The basement alarm kept chirping, and if it was connected to the water system or sump pump, ignoring it during heavy rain could mean real damage. I could wait in the dark and hope Daniel called back, or I could unlatch the door, leave Cooper upstairs, and find switch 12. My hand hovered inches from the hook. I called Daniel a third time before touching the latch. The call didn't even ring. My screen held on calling for 3 seconds, then dropped back to his contact photo, a cropped picture of Cooper sitting in snow with a tennis ball between his paws. The chirp sounded again below me. Every 30 seconds, too measured for an animal, too clean for a settling pipe. Stay, I told Cooper. He looked at me. Cooper, stay. He knew the command. Rachel had demonstrated it twice before leaving, holding up one flat palm and speaking in the calm, serious tone people use when they want a dog to understand that this time matters. Cooper had stayed then. Now he followed me as I crossed to the kitchen drawer. I found 2 flashlights beneath a stack of takeout menus. One was a heavy black mag light with corroded batteries that produced a weak orange circle. The other was a plastic camping light with a wrist strap and a much stronger beam. I took both, put my phone in my back pocket, and returned to the basement door. Cooper stood close enough that his shoulder touched my thigh. "You're making this worse," I said. The wind pressed against the side of the house. Water moved through the gutters with a constant rushing sound, like a tap running somewhere just out of sight. The chirp came again. I lifted the brass hook. The door remained closed. For 1 second, I considered fastening it again. That was the sensible choice. Daniel had said to call first. I had called. The call had failed. Those were not the same thing, but I could have waited 10 minutes, 20. The refrigerator would stay cold for hours if unopened. The house wasn't freezing. If the sound came from a smoke detector, I would smell smoke eventually. But that was exactly the kind of logic I distrusted in myself. Eventually, maybe, wait and see. Those had been the words around my father's death. Wait and see whether the chest pain passed. Wait and see whether the urgent care opened. Wait and see whether the ambulance really needed to come all the way out to our road. By the time my mother called, he was unconscious on the kitchen floor. I had built a private religion around acting early after that. Checking locks twice. Arriving at airports 3 hours before flights. Calling back when someone said they were probably fine. It made me useful in emergencies and exhausting everywhere else. The alarm chirped again. I opened the door. Cool air moved across my ankles, carrying the smell of damp concrete, dust, and something sharper underneath. Electrical heat, maybe. The odor you get when a vacuum cleaner belt slips. The basement light was still off. My flashlight beam reached the bottom of the stairs and landed on pale gray floor. The box labeled winter dog things sat where Daniel had pushed it, several feet from the landing now. Behind it were plastic storage tubs, a folded card table, and a child's red sled leaning against the wall. Nothing moved. "Stay," I told Cooper again. I stepped down. The stairs were narrower than they had looked from above. Painted wood, no carpet, worn smooth through the center. My socks slid slightly on the second step. I stopped. Shoes. I had taken my wet boots off in the mudroom and never replaced them. For a moment, I felt stupid enough to laugh. Going into a basement during an outage in socks was exactly how people ended up explaining an injury to an emergency room nurse. I backed up, shut the door without latching it, and pulled on Daniel's rubber gardening clogs from a row near the mudroom. They were at least 3 sizes too large. My heels lifted with every step. Cooper whined, "I know." When I reopened the door, he was already positioned beside it. I pointed toward the dining room. "Stay." This time he sat. I descended, one hand on the railing, the other holding the camping light. The stairs creaked under my weight in individual notes. 3rd step, 5th, 7th. The chirp sounded somewhere to my left. At the bottom, the basement divided into 3 spaces. The main room held shelving, storage boxes, a furnace, and a workbench. An open doorway led to a laundry room. Farther back, another door had a narrow, wired glass window. That had to be the exterior bulkhead Daniel mentioned in the rules. The air was colder than upstairs. And wet. Not flooded, but damp enough that the concrete reflected my flashlight in smeared patches. I aimed the beam downward and saw water creeping from beneath the laundry room door in a thin, irregular stream. Damn it. That explained the alarm. Probably. I followed the water. The laundry room contained a washer, dryer, utility sink, hot water tank, and a square sump pump pit in the far corner. A small battery-powered alarm sat on the floor beside it, flashing red each time it chirped. The pit was nearly full. Dark water trembled less than an inch below the rim. The sump pump had stopped with the electricity, and the backup system, if there was one, wasn't working. I took my phone out and tried Daniel again. No service. The chirp went off at my feet, loud enough to make me flinch. Above me, Cooper barked. "I'm okay," I called. My voice carried strangely through the basement, flattened by the concrete walls. The breaker panel was mounted beside the utility sink. I opened the metal door and found a grid of numbered switches. Most were labeled in neat black print. 1 kitchen 4 upstairs, hall 8 furnace 12 sump/basement, OUTLETS, switch 12, sat halfway between on and off. Tripped. I remembered Daniel's text. Reset, switch 12. I pushed it fully off, then back on. The pump started immediately with a rough grinding roar. Water inside the pit spun, dropped 2 inches, then stopped. The breaker snapped back to the middle. The room went quiet except for the alarm. I stared at the switch. A tripped breaker could be ordinary. Too much load. Water near an outlet. Failing motor. Resetting it again without knowing why it had tripped was not ordinary. Even I knew that. I searched the wall for an unplugged cord or backup switch. The pump cable disappeared behind the washer and into an outlet fitted with a red reset button. The wall around it was dry. Another cord ran from the dehumidifier in the next room, along the floor, and into the same circuit through an extension strip. The extension strip sat in water, not submerged. The creeping stream had only reached one end, darkening the dust around it. But the plastic casing was wet. I crouched, careful not to touch it. The dehumidifier cord had been stretched tight across the doorway. Its plug looked slightly pulled from the strip, exposing a sliver of metal. That could explain the breaker. It could also kill me if I handled it badly. Upstairs, Cooper scratched at the basement door, 3 fast strokes. Then a pause. The sound was almost identical to the noise I had heard when I first arrived. "Cooper, stop." The scratching continued. I stood and looked around for something non-conductive. Wooden broom leaned near the utility sink. I used its handle to push the extension strip away from the water, then hooked the dehumidifier cord and dragged the plug free. A blue spark jumped at the connection. The breaker panel made a hard click. The camping light slipped in my hand, its beam whipping across the room. For an instant, it illuminated the wired glass window in the bulkhead door. A shape passed behind it. I froze. The window showed only a distorted rectangle of darkness and rainwater. Something had moved outside. A person, I thought, or a branch, a deer. Reflected light from my own flashlight, I raised the beam. Hello. The rain hammered the metal doors beyond the window. No answer. I stepped closer. Mud marked the concrete near the bulkhead. Not a lot. 3 partial prints, blurred by water. The tread was rectangular and deep, too straight to be an animal track. Work boot, maybe. Daniel had probably been down here earlier. He had said the shelving was overloaded. Rachel mentioned the old pipe repair. Contractors could have come through the bulkhead, except the prints looked wet, fresh wet. Water still gleamed in the grooves. A noise came from the main basement room, a box shifting. Then Cooper barked upstairs, frantic now. I swung the flashlight toward the doorway. Daniel, nothing. I knew it was Daniel. His car had left. I had watched his taillights vanish down the driveway. But saying a name felt better than saying, "Who's there?" My phone vibrated in my hand. One bar. A text message arrived from Rachel. "Do not reset the breaker again. Is the sump pit full?" I typed quickly, almost overflowing. Breaker trips when pump starts. Extension strip got wet. Someone may be outside basement bulkhead. The message showed one empty checkmark, then failed. I tried calling her. This time the line connected. Static filled my ear. "Mara," Rachel's voice broke in and out. "Can you hear?" "Yes. The sump pump isn't working. Do not touch the water." "I'm not." "Is Daniel there?" "No, he left." A sharp burst of static covered her reply. "What?" I said. "He should still be near you. He drove away almost an hour ago." Silence. Not a lost signal silence. I could hear road noise behind her and the rhythmic slap of windshield wipers. Then Rachel said, "He told me he was turning around." "Turning around from where?" "The Merit. After you texted about the power." "I didn't text him about the power. He texted me." Rachel breathed out. "Go upstairs." The way she said it changed my grip on the phone. "What's wrong?" "Nothing. I want you upstairs with Cooper. Lock the basement door." "There are wet boot prints by the bulkhead." "I know. Go upstairs." "You know. I understand what you're saying." "No, you said you know." The call crackled. Rachel spoke more loudly. "The sump pump can wait. There's a hardware store battery pump in the garage, but you are not going to install it. We'll call someone." "The water's already spreading." "How high?" "Almost at the rim." Another pause. "The furnace is down there," she said, mostly to herself. "And the electrical outlets." Rachel, who could be outside? Nobody should be. Something struck the bulkhead doors from outside. Not a knock. A heavy impact that made the metal flex inward with a low booming sound. I stepped backward. Rachel heard it through the phone. "What was that?" "I don't know." The handle on the interior bulkhead door moved. Down, then up. Someone was testing it. "Mara," Rachel said, "get upstairs now." I turned. At that exact moment, the basement door above me slammed shut. Cooper's barking became muffled. The flashlight beam shook across the stairwell. "Cooper." I ran to the stairs and climbed too quickly, Daniel's oversized clogs catching on the edges. One slid off my foot around the 5th step. I left it behind. At the top, I pushed the door. It didn't move. The brass hook had fallen into place. That was impossible. The hook was mounted outside the basement, on the kitchen side. It could not latch itself from where I stood. The door might have swung shut from pressure, but the hook had to be lifted and placed into the eye screw by hand. I shoved harder. "Cooper," he scratched from the other side. His nails raked the wood just inches from my face. Rachel's voice came thinly from my phone. "What happened?" "The doors latched." "What do you mean latched?" "The hook. Someone closed it from upstairs." "That's not possible." "I know how a latch works." "Is Cooper with you?" "He's outside the door." The handle on the bulkhead moved again below me. Slowly this time, pressed down, held, released. I put my shoulder against the basement door and drove upward. wood shuddered but stayed shut. "Call 911, Rachel said. "I have one bar. Call anyway." I ended the call and dialed. The screen showed emergency call. It rang once, twice. A dispatcher answered through broken static. 911, what is the address of your emergency? I gave the address from memory, then checked the laminated card Daniel had placed beside the alarm keypad in my mind. Old Mill Road, North Stamford, house number 114 or 141. My certainty vanished. 141, I said, I think. It's the Mercer residence near, the call dropped. No, I dialed again. No service. Behind the door, Cooper stopped scratching. For a few seconds, I heard only his breathing through the gap near the floor. Then floorboards creaked in the kitchen. One step, a second, human weight. Someone was inside the house. I crouched and aimed my flashlight through the narrow space beneath the door, but the beam reflected off the threshold. I saw only a slice of kitchen tile and Cooper's front paws. They shifted backward. "Cooper," I whispered. His tags jingled. A man's voice spoke above me, low, calm, close to the door. "Easy, Baxter." Cooper gave a short, uncertain whine. The name landed harder than the bulkhead impact. I pressed both hands over my mouth before I could make a sound. Upstairs, the man moved away from the door. A cabinet opened. Something metal touched the counter. Below me, the interior bulkhead latch clicked. Once, then again. There was someone upstairs, and someone was trying to enter from outside. The sump alarm chirped behind me, regular and indifferent, while water continued spreading across the basement floor. I had two directions available. Neither led somewhere safe. The man upstairs opened another cabinet. Wood knocked softly against wood. Then came the thin rattle of glass jars shifting on a shelf. I stayed crouched at the top of the basement stairs, one hand braced against the door and the other gripping my phone, though the screen showed no signal. Cooper stood on the kitchen side. I could see the shadow of his paws beneath the gap. The bulkhead handle moved again below me. I was trapped between two doors. The basement was shaped like a crooked capital, while the interior stairs rose from the northwest corner into the kitchen. At the foot of those stairs, the main storage room stretched east toward the furnace and workbench. The laundry room opened from the south wall, with the sump pit in its far corner. Beyond the furnace, at the eastern end, the wired glass door led into a short concrete passage beneath the exterior bulkhead doors. The person upstairs blocked the only route into the house. Whoever was at the bulkhead blocked the other way out. Water continued inching from the laundry room into the main space, following shallow cracks in the concrete. The red sump alarm flashed with each chirp, giving the basement a pulse. I put my mouth close to the kitchen door. "Cooper," I whispered. "Go lie down." His nails clicked. A man murmured something I couldn't make out. Then Cooper's paws disappeared from the gap. I could hear him walking away. The man had control of him. That hit me harder than being trapped. Cooper was old, medicated, and trusting. He would approach anyone who spoke gently enough. Rachel had shown me how he leaned into strangers at the park, how he would put his whole weight against someone's knees, as though affection were a balance problem. I tried 911 again. The phone found one bar, then lost it. I climbed down 3 steps, raised the phone over my head, and held it near the basement ceiling. 1 bar. I dialed. The call connected. 911. What is the location of your emergency? The dispatcher's voice was clearer this time. 141 Old Mill Road, I said quickly. North Stamford, Connecticut. I'm trapped in the basement. There's someone inside the house. Are you able to leave through another exit? There's a bulkhead, but someone's trying to open it from outside. Do you know the people attempting entry? No, the signal crackled. What is your name? Mara Ellis. Are you injured? Not yet. The answer sounded absurd the second I said it. The floorboards creaked above me again. I lowered my voice. There's an elderly dog upstairs with the person. Do not confront anyone. Officers are being sent. Can you secure yourself in a room? The laundry room locks maybe, but it's flooding. The sump pump failed. The dispatcher asked something about water near the electrical panel, but half the sentence vanished in static. I can't hear you. Move away from standing water and electrical equipment. I'm trying. The basement door shook above me. 1 short impact. The man on the kitchen side had pushed it. I stepped backward and nearly lost my footing. Someone at the door. Do not engage. The hook scraped against the eye screw. He was testing the latch. It held because he had fastened it himself, but he still pushed, as if checking how firmly the door had caught. Then his voice came through the wood. Mara, he knew my name. The dispatcher said, do not answer him. I didn't. Mara, it's Daniel. I looked at the door. The voice sounded like Daniel. Not exactly. Muffled by wood, distorted by the stairwell, but close enough that my brain immediately supplied his face. Wet, sandy hair, green jacket, the garage remote in his hand. Daniel, I said before I could stop myself. The dispatcher's voice sharpened. Ma'am, do not. It's me, the man said. Open the door. You latched it. A pause. I thought you were upstairs. You called Cooper Baxter. Another pause. Longer this time. Then the man laughed once, softly. Not amused. More like he had realized he'd made a mistake. The call dropped. My phone returned to the lock screen. No service. The person upstairs stepped away. I stood there listening until the sump alarm chirped again and snapped me back into the room. First attempt, call for help, partial success. The police had an address. Maybe, but I had also answered the man, confirmed I was at the basement door, and let him know I had heard him use Baxter's name. I went down the stairs. My left foot, wearing only a sock, hit the cold concrete. The other remained inside Daniel's loose rubber clog. I kicked it off. Moving unevenly would get me hurt. The flashlight beam trembled across the water. I needed a defensible space. The laundry room had a solid wooden door, unlike the open frame I had first thought I'd seen. It stood flat against the wall, hidden behind the dryer. I pulled it across the doorway and tested the knob. No lock. The hinges were on my side. That gave me an idea. I dragged a plastic shelving unit toward the door. It was loaded with detergent bottles, rags, and a rusted iron. The legs screeched against the floor. Upstairs, the man stopped moving. I froze. The scraping had been loud. Too loud. A second later, he crossed the kitchen toward the basement again. I pulled harder. The shelf tipped. A bottle of bleach fell and struck the floor, splitting near the handle. The chemical smell spread instantly. sharp enough to make my eyes water. Damn it. I righted the shelf and shoved it against the laundry room door. It wouldn't stop someone determined, but it might slow them. The bleach flowed into the water in pale, twisting lines. I backed away, covering my nose. Then I remembered the dehumidifier strip and the electrical panel. Bleach wasn't flammable in the way gasoline was, but mixing cleaning chemicals could create toxic fumes. I didn't know what else had spilled from the shelf. A blue detergent bottle had cracked too. Something labeled mildew remover lay on its side, leaking near the wall. The laundry room was becoming unsafe. I had barricaded myself into the worst part of the basement. Second attempt, secure the room. Failed. I dragged the shelving unit aside again, coughing, and pulled the door open. My eyes burned. The chemical odor followed me into the main storage area. From the bulkhead passage came a metallic bang. I spun, flashlight raised. The wired glass door jumped in its frame. Another bang. The handle twisted hard. Whoever was outside had stopped being careful. I moved toward the passage, then stopped 10 feet away. The main room narrowed there between the furnace on the left and tall metal shelves on the right. If someone came through the bulkhead, I would have nowhere to pass them. A shadow filled the wired window. Broad shoulders, head lowered. The figure struck the door again. I grabbed the wooden broom from the laundry room and held it like a spear, feeling ridiculous and terrified at the same time. "Police are coming," I shouted. The shadow jerked back. Then something barked. Not Cooper. A harsh, repetitive burst from just beyond the glass. The shape lunged at the door. I backed into the furnace. The metal housing boomed behind me. The wired glass pane filled with a pale face. For 1 second, I thought a man was pressing himself against it. Then the face moved sideways, and I saw a wet black nose, a white muzzle, and one brown eye distorted by the glass. A dog. A large dog was trapped in the bulkhead stairwell. The shadow was not a person. It was a dog standing on its hind legs, striking the interior door with its front paws. Relief came so fast it made my knees weak. Then I noticed the lead attached to its collar. A dark nylon leash trailed upward behind it, through the gap beneath the exterior doors. Someone had tied or caught the dog outside. The animal barked again and scratched frantically at the wired glass door. Mud streaked the window. Its breath fogged the pane. "Hey," I said. "Easy." The dog stopped for half a second at the sound of my voice. A German shepherd, maybe 7 or 8 years old, soaked through and panting. Its ribs moved quickly beneath its coat. The terrifying figure had an explanation. The leash did not. I approached carefully. The interior bulkhead door opened toward me, which meant the dog would surge into the basement if I unlatched it. Beyond that door was a short concrete stairwell, climbing east to the exterior steel doors at ground level. I aimed the flashlight upward through the wired glass. The outside doors appeared shut, but one had warped inward near the bottom. Rainwater poured through the gap and ran down the steps. The dog's leash disappeared through that same opening. It might have wandered onto the property, caught the leash beneath the door, and become trapped when the storm worsened. Plausible. But why were there wet human boot prints on the basement floor? The shepherd barked toward the top of the stairwell, not at me. Something moved outside. The leash tightened. The dog was pulled backward so suddenly that its paws slid out from under it. It yelped. I grabbed the interior handle but did not open the door. A man shouted faintly from outside. "Hold on," not Daniel's voice. Older, rougher, the exterior door rattled. "Who are you?" I shouted. "Get this damn door open." "Who are you?" My dog stuck. The shepherd scrambled upright and pawed the glass. "What's your name?" "Tom. I live next door." I didn't remember seeing a nearby house. The Mercer property had trees on both sides, but there could have been one beyond the stone wall west of the driveway. The man shouted again. "The leash is jammed under the door. Open it from inside." I kept the broom raised. "How did you get into the bulkhead?" "I didn't. The dog did. He chased something through the yard." The story made sense badly, which was not the same as not making sense. A dog could push through a loose bulkhead door. A leash could snag. A neighbor could follow. But the interior door had been locked, or at least fully closed, and someone had left boot prints inside. "Police are coming," I said. "Good for them. My dog's choking." The shepherd coughed as if to support him. The leash remained taut. I could not tell whether pressure came from the snag or from the man pulling it. "What's the dog's name?" "Rufus." "Stop pulling Rufus. I'm trying to keep him from breaking his neck." "Let go of the leash." "I can't reach the clip." Rufus pawed the glass again. One nail had torn, blood marked the lower pane in thin red smears. My father's kitchen came back to me in pieces. The phone on the floor. My mother saying she thought he needed another minute. Me driving too fast and still arriving too late. Wait and see. The phrase crawled through my head. Rufus coughed again. I opened the interior door 3 inches. The dog forced his muzzle through immediately. I pushed back with my shoulder. "Easy, easy." The leash pulled tight, cutting into the fur under his jaw. I widened the gap enough to reach through. Rufus snapped once near my wrist, not trying to bite, just panicked, and his teeth scraped the flashlight from my hand. It fell into the passage and rolled down 1 step, beam spinning. The outside man shouted, "Unclip him." "I'm trying." I reached for the collar. Rufus twisted. 1 tooth caught the base of my thumb. Pain flashed through my hand. I jerked away and slammed the door. Blood appeared almost at once, filling a curved puncture just below my thumb joint. Rufus barked frantic. The man outside cursed me. My hand throbbed. I wrapped it in the hem of my shirt and pressed hard. The bite wasn't deep, but dog mouths carried bacteria, and I could already see the skin swelling. The camping flashlight lay in the stairwell with Rufus. I had only the weak maglite now. Another partial attempt. I had identified the outside threat, perhaps. I had also injured myself and lost the best light. "Tom," I called through the door. "Back away from the exterior doors." "What?" "Back away. Give the leash slack." For several seconds, nothing happened. Then the leash loosened. Rufus lowered his head and coughed. I opened the door again, keeping my injured hand behind me. With the broom handle, I hooked the leash near the collar and lifted it away from the dog's throat. The nylon had twisted around a metal bracket on the stair rail, not trapped under the exterior door, wrapped deliberately around the bracket. Someone had looped it twice. I stared at it. Rufus's movement could have tightened the loops, but he could not have threaded the leash that way himself. "Tom," I said, "how did this get wrapped around the railing?" No answer. "Tom," rainwater ran down the steps. The exterior doors shifted. A face appeared in the narrow opening at the bottom edge upside down, one eye and part of a cheek visible through the gap. I recoiled. The man outside was lying flat on the ground, looking in. "I can see you," he said. His tone had changed. No panic now. No concern for the dog. Calm. Open the door. I shoved the interior bulkhead door closed and turned the deadbolt. A second later, Rufus lunged against it from the other side, barking wildly. The man began pounding on the exterior doors. I ran back into the main room. My sock slipped in the spreading water. I fell hard on my right knee and caught myself with the injured hand. The puncture tore wider. A warm sheet of blood ran across my palm. For a few seconds, I stayed on all fours, breathing through my teeth. My knee felt loose and hot. When I stood, pain climbed into my thigh. Above me, the kitchen door opened. Not fully. The latch scraped. The man upstairs had removed the hook. Light from a battery lantern or phone spilled down the upper steps. "Mara," Daniel's voice called. "You need to come up now." I backed toward the workbench. The figure appeared at the top of the stairs. Green jacket, sandy hair, Daniel. It really was him. He stood above me holding a flashlight in one hand and something metallic in the other. A pry bar. Cooper was not beside him. "Where Cooper?" I asked. Daniel looked at the water around my feet, then at the blood on my hand. "You opened the bulkhead door." "No, where is Cooper? He's safe." "Why did you lock me down here?" Daniel descended one step. Behind me, the exterior doors boomed as the man outside struck them again. Daniel's eyes shifted toward the sound. "Who's out there?" "A man who says he's your neighbor." Daniel's face tightened. "We don't have a neighbor named Tom." The basement lights came on. Every fixture flashed white at once. The sump pump roared. The breaker had reset from somewhere upstairs. Water surged inside the pit. Then came a bright crack from the laundry room. Blue light flickered across the concrete. The extension strip sparked. Flame crawled briefly along the spilled chemicals near the baseboard, not a wall of fire, just a fast orange line that caught on a rag beneath the shelving unit. Smoke rolled upward. Daniel shouted, "Move." The sump pump stopped. The lights died again. The rag continued burning. Daniel came down the stairs as I limped toward the laundry room. He grabbed a red fire extinguisher from beneath the workbench, pulled the pin, and discharged it through the doorway. White powder blasted across the floor. The flame vanished. So did visibility. The basement filled with chemical dust and smoke. I coughed until my ribs hurt. Daniel seized my arm and pulled me back toward the stairs. The bulkhead door crashed open behind us. Not the exterior steel doors, the interior wired glass door. Rufus burst into the main room, dragging the twisted leash and scattering water. Behind him, a man's boots hit the concrete steps. Daniel stopped. I stopped. The man entered the basement through the white haze. Thomas Vale was 58 years old and a man, broad through the chest, with a gray beard cut close to his jaw and a dark raincoat shining with water. I had never seen him before. He held the camping flashlight I had dropped, and its beam pointed directly at Daniel. Rufus ran past us toward the interior stairs. Thomas looked at Daniel, not me. "You should have called me back," he said. Daniel tightened his grip on the extinguisher. "You need to leave." Thomas smiled without showing teeth. "Do that now." Sirens sounded somewhere beyond the trees, faint but approaching. For one hopeful second, all three of us listened. Then Daniel kicked the basement door shut behind him and dropped the pry bar through the stair railing, jamming it crosswise between the door and the frame. He had not come down to rescue me. He had come down to keep everyone else out. Above us, Cooper began barking. The smoke thickened around the ceiling. Water spread beneath our feet. Thomas blocked the bulkhead passage. Daniel blocked the stairs. And with the pry bar wedged into the only door leading to the police, retreat was no longer possible. Thomas kept the camping flashlight aimed at Daniel's chest. The beam cut through extinguisher dust, catching white particles that drifted between them like dry snow. Rufus stood near the bottom of the kitchen stairs, soaked and shaking, his leash trailing through the water. Above him, Cooper barked behind the jammed door. Daniel held the discharged extinguisher by its handle. I stood between the workbench and the furnace, trying not to put weight on my right knee. Blood ran from the bite in my hand, around my wrist, and into my sleeve. The sirens grew louder, then stopped, not at the house, somewhere on the road. The storm swallowed the rest. Thomas glanced toward the ceiling. "They'll go to the front first." Daniel said nothing. "They'll knock," Thomas continued. "They'll see the lights are out. Maybe they walk around back. Maybe they don't. Depends how much that girl told them before the call dropped." "That girl has a name," I said. Neither man looked at me. Thomas lowered the flashlight slightly. "Where's the box?" Daniel's grip tightened around the extinguisher. "What box?" he asked. Thomas smiled. "The one you moved away from the stairs." My eyes went to the cardboard box marked winter dog things. It sat behind Thomas, near the main shelving. Daniel followed my gaze. That was enough. Thomas turned. Daniel moved first. He swung the extinguisher with both hands. Thomas ducked, but not fully. The metal cylinder caught him across the shoulder with a blunt, ugly sound. The camping light flew from his hand and skidded beneath the shelves. Rufus barked and lunged. Daniel swung again. Thomas drove forward, hitting him around the waist. They slammed into the furnace housing. Sheet metal buckled. The extinguisher fell and rolled through the shallow water. I backed away. My knee gave. I caught myself against the workbench, sending screwdrivers and a coffee tin of nails rattling across its surface. Thomas punched Daniel once in the side of the head. Daniel staggered. Thomas struck him again. Not movie punches. Short, clumsy blows delivered at close range, powered more by panic than technique. Daniel tried to shield his face. Thomas grabbed the front of his green jacket and drove him into the furnace. "Where is it?" Daniel spat blood onto the concrete. "Go to hell." Thomas hit him in the ribs. Daniel folded. I looked toward the stairs. The pry bar was wedged through two railing spindles, its hooked end pressed against the basement door. To remove it, I would have to climb past Rufus and come within reach of Daniel and Thomas. Cooper barked again upstairs. 3 fast barks, then a whine. Thomas dragged Daniel toward the box. "Open it." Daniel laughed weakly. "You brought a dog to force your way into my house." I knew she'd opened the door for him. His eyes shifted toward me then, just briefly. You looked like the type. I felt heat crawl up my neck, even in the cold basement. He had used the dog because he knew someone would help. He had counted on it. Daniel saw my expression. He's Rachel's brother, he said. Thomas kicked the back of his knee. Daniel dropped to the floor. The relationship landed without surprise. Their anger already had the close, repetitive quality of family damage, old sentences, old leverage, nothing being said for the first time. Half-brother, Thomas corrected. When she remembers. He pushed the box toward Daniel with his boot. Open it. The cardboard had softened along the bottom where water had reached it. Daniel tore through the tape with shaking fingers. Inside were folded dog coats, a cracked plastic food bowl, tennis balls gone gray with age, and a red wool blanket. Then came the metallic sound I had heard earlier, a collar tag striking the side of the box. Once, twice, Daniel stopped moving. Thomas crouched. At the bottom of the box lay a wide brown leather collar. A brass tag hung from it. BAXDER. Thomas grabbed it. Daniel caught his wrist. They struggled over the collar, kneeling in the water. The old leather tore. A small black object dropped from a stitched pouch on the inside and landed on the concrete. A memory card. Thomas reached for it. I stepped on his hand. It wasn't planned. I saw his fingers stretch toward the card, and my body moved before the rest of me caught up. My bare heel came down across his knuckles. Thomas shouted. He jerked backward and struck my injured knee with his shoulder. Pain exploded up my leg. I fell against the shelves. Metal rocked above me. Plastic tubs shifted. Daniel grabbed the memory card. Thomas seized my ankle. I kicked with my other foot, catching him across the mouth. His head snapped sideways. He did not release me. He pulled. My back struck the concrete. The weak mag light fell from my pocket and rolled away, its orange beam turning slowly across the ceiling. Thomas crawled over me. His lip was split. Water and extinguisher powder streaked his beard. Give it to me, he said. I don't have it. He slapped me. The side of my face struck the floor. For a moment, the basement narrowed to the taste of detergent and blood. Then Rufus growled, low, close. Thomas turned his head. The German shepherd stood 6 feet away, body stiff, leash dragging behind him. He was not looking at me. He was looking at Thomas. Rufus, Thomas said. The dog's ears flattened. Thomas reached toward him. Rufus backed away. That hesitation gave Daniel time to stand. He held the memory card between 2 fingers. You killed Baxter for this, he said. Thomas looked at him. I didn't know the camera was running. You kicked him down the stairs. He bit me. He was protecting the house. He was a dog. Daniel's face changed. Not rage exactly. Something flatter, more exhausted. You told Rachel he slipped. You told her too. That silenced him. The answer was there. Daniel had not killed Baxter. He had helped bury the truth. Thomas pointed at the card. You kept it because you wanted insurance. I kept it because Rachel deserved the truth. 5 years late, Daniel looked toward the ceiling, toward where Cooper waited. I kept thinking there'd be a right time. I understood that answer more than I wanted to. Hold on long enough. Study the loss. Wait for the moment when telling the truth would no longer destroy anything. There was no such moment. Thomas lunged. Daniel stepped backward into the water near the laundry doorway. His heel caught the discharged extinguisher. He fell. The memory card flew from his hand. It landed beside the wet extension strip. Thomas stopped. So did I. A faint blue spark snapped from the exposed plug. The breaker upstairs had remained tripped, but the house wiring was unstable. Power could return without warning. A generator, a utility repair, an automatic reset somewhere outside, I didn't know. The card lay less than a foot from the strip. Thomas moved toward it. "Don't," I said. He ignored me. Daniel, still on the floor, grabbed his coat. Thomas kicked him in the face. Daniel went limp. I crawled toward the workbench and pulled myself upright. My knee could barely bend. My bitten hand had become a swollen claw. Thomas crouched near the extension strip. The basement lights flickered. One white flash, darkness. The pump coughed once. Thomas froze with his hand extended. I saw the broom leaning against the laundry room frame. I reached it in 2 limping steps. The lights flashed again. This time, the sump pump started. Water surged inside the pit. The motor groaned. The extension strip spat sparks. I hooked the broom around the memory card and dragged it away. Thomas grabbed the handle. We pulled against each other. My injured hand slipped. He yanked the broom from me and threw it aside. Then he reached down. The extension strip arced. A sharp blue-white flash filled the room. Thomas screamed and fell backward. He had not touched the plug directly. His hand had landed in the water beside it when the current jumped through the wet floor. The breaker snapped off almost instantly, but his muscles locked long enough to throw him onto his back. He lay stunned, breathing in short grunts. No miraculous electrocution. No body flung across the room. Just a man on wet concrete whose right hand no longer obeyed him. The sump pump stopped again. Smoke curled from the strip. I grabbed the wooden broom, pushed the extension cord farther into the laundry room, then used the handle to drag the memory card toward me. Thomas tried to rise. Rufus stepped between us. The dog bared his teeth. Thomas stopped. Rufus. The shepherd did not move. Behind me, Daniel groaned. I picked up the card and shoved it inside my bra because I had no pockets left that I trusted. Then I limped toward the stairs. Thomas watched me. "You think that proves anything?" he said. "It proves enough to make people ask." He laughed through clenched teeth. Daniel S. on it too. He helped clean the blood. He replaced the stair tread. He lied to his wife. Daniel rolled onto his side. "I know," he whispered. I reached the bottom stair. Rufus remained between Thomas and the room. The dog was trembling harder now, confused by the shouting, the smoke, the smells, and the man he knew lying in the water. I climbed, 1 step at a time. My right knee shook with every lift. I used my forearms on the railing because my bitten hand could not close around it. At the 4th step, Daniel said my name. I looked back. He had pushed himself upright against the furnace. Blood covered his upper lip. One eye was swelling closed. "Take Cooper," he said. Thomas laughed again. "She's not getting through that door." The pry bar still blocked it. I reached the top and examined the angle. Daniel had shoved the straight end through the railing, with the hooked end wedged beneath the doorknob plate. Pulling it toward me tightened it. It needed to be driven sideways and downward. My hands were useless. I took off the remaining sock. I looped it around the pry bar to improve my grip, then leaned my weight against the metal. Nothing. Below me, Thomas began talking softly to Rufus. "Come here, boy." The dog's growl faded. I pushed harder. My knee buckled. I fell against the door, biting back a scream. The pry bar shifted half an inch. Cooper scratched from the kitchen side. "Mara," a voice called faintly from upstairs. Not Daniel, a stranger. "Police," I shouted. Basement door. Footsteps crossed the kitchen. The knob moved. The pry bar held. "Step away from the door," the voice ordered. "I can't. It's jammed from this side." Below me, Rufus barked. Thomas was standing again. His right arm hung against his body, but he held the camping flashlight in his left hand. He swung it at Rufus. The dog yelped and retreated. Thomas came toward the stairs. Daniel wrapped both arms around one of his legs. Thomas kicked backward. Daniel held on. "Move it," he shouted at me. I planted my good foot against the wall and used both hands on the sock. The police officer hit the door from above. Once, the frame cracked. Thomas dragged Daniel 2 feet across the floor. The officer struck again. The brass eye screw tore loose from the wood. The door opened 3 inches, then stopped against the pry bar. I shoved downward. The bar slipped free. The door burst inward. I fell onto the kitchen floor. 2 uniformed officers stood above me with weapons drawn, their flashlights filling the stairwell. Cooper crouched behind the kitchen table, leash looped around one leg. A chef's knife lay on the counter beside an open bottle of his medication. The metallic object I had heard earlier. Daniel had been looking for pills, or using the bottle to make Cooper easier to control. One officer pulled me away from the doorway, while the other shouted commands into the basement. Thomas tried to run toward the bulkhead. His damaged hand failed when he grabbed the doorframe. Daniel caught his coat. Both men fell. Rufus bolted past them, up the stairs, and into the kitchen. The officers went down carefully, one covering while the other moved. There was no clean takedown. Thomas resisted. He slipped in the water, struck his forehead against the concrete, and kept swinging until an officer used a stun gun at close range. Daniel did not resist. He lay beside the furnace with his hands visible. "I lied," he kept saying, not to the officers, to himself maybe, or to Rachel. The sump alarm continued chirping. 30 seconds. Red flash. 30 seconds. Red flash. I sat against the kitchen cabinets with Cooper's head in my lap. My injured hand rested uselessly against his shoulder. He smelled of wet fur and the bitter powder from a crushed tablet. Someone had given him more medication than Rachel instructed. His eyelids sagged, and his back legs slid when he tried to stand. The first officer called for an ambulance, animal control, and the fire department. Then he asked whether anyone else was in the house. I looked toward the open basement door. Smoke and extinguisher dust drifted up the stairs. "No," I said. This time I was almost certain. The central danger ended there. Thomas was handcuffed on the basement floor. Daniel was detained beside him. The memory card remained against my skin, warm from my body. Cooper was alive. Rufus was alive. But my knee had begun swelling beneath my jeans. My hand needed stitches and antibiotics, and Cooper's breathing was too slow. Outside, red emergency lights moved across the rain-soaked windows. The colors passed over the basement rules sheet, still taped to the door. For an instant, I could read the 6th line clearly. If Baxter is already in the basement, do not call him upstairs. Close the door and text Daniel. Daniel had written it after Baxter's arthritis worsened. An ordinary rule, a compassionate one once. Then Baxter died at the bottom of those stairs, and the sentence stayed behind, waiting for strangers to give it meanings it had never been intended to carry. The horror was not that the dead dog had returned. It was that every living person in the house had known part of what happened to him. And for 5 years, they had all found reasons not to say it aloud. The paramedics cut my jeans above the knee in the Mercer kitchen. I remember being embarrassed by that. Not the blood, not the police officer photographing the bite in my hand with a numbered evidence marker beside it. Not Thomas shouting from the basement that his fingers were numb, or Daniel asking repeatedly whether Rachel had arrived. I was embarrassed because my underwear had little blue flowers on it, and one of the paramedics was a man about my age. Trauma is strange that way. The mind finds one small humiliation and holds onto it because the larger thing has no useful shape. The paramedic's name was Lewis. He told me before he touched my leg, then again after I didn't respond. Mara, I'm going to check the knee now. Okay, this will hurt. He was right. The pain was deep and immediate, not sharp like the bite. My kneecap had shifted when Thomas pulled me down, then partly returned when I fell near the laundry room. Lewis stabilized it in a foam splint and asked whether I could feel my toes. I could. That became the first piece of good news. The second was that Cooper was still breathing. A firefighter carried him out wrapped in the old red blanket from Baxter's box. Cooper's head lolled against the man's arm, muzzle slack, tongue showing slightly between his teeth. For a moment, the blanket made him look like the wrong dog. I pushed myself upright. Where are they taking him? Emergency vet, a woman said behind me. Rachel stood in the mudroom. She had no coat. Rain had soaked her cream sweater from shoulders to cuffs, and strands of dark hair clung to the sides of her face. Her silver watch was still on. She looked at it once, automatically, then seemed ashamed of herself for doing it. Rachel, Daniel called from the hallway. An officer blocked him from entering the kitchen. Daniel's wrists were cuffed in front of him. Blood had dried below his nose and along his chin. His green jacket was open, revealing a white shirt marked with gray extinguisher powder. Rachel looked at him. She did not ask whether he was all right. She looked past him toward the basement door, where investigators had begun placing yellow evidence markers on the floor. "Is it true?" she asked. Daniel lowered his head. That was his answer. Rachel closed her eyes, not for long, maybe 2 seconds. Then Cooper made a weak sound from the firefighter's arms, and she turned away from her husband. "I'm going with the dog," she said. One of the officers told her they would need a statement. "You can get it at the clinic." "Ma'am, at the clinic." Her voice had the same brisk authority I remembered from the house tour, but it shook at the edges. She took the red blanket from the firefighter and climbed into the rear of the animal control vehicle beside Cooper. She did not look back at Daniel. Rufus left in a separate van. He resisted the catch pole at first, backing beneath the kitchen table and barking at anyone who came near. When an animal control officer crouched sideways and offered him pieces of turkey from the refrigerator, he eventually crept forward. His leash had been removed from the bulkhead railing and sealed in an evidence bag. The officer said Rufus would be held while they determined ownership and checked his records. Thomas claimed the dog was his. Rachel later said he was not. That became one of many things Thomas lied about that night. At Stamford Hospital, they irrigated the bite for what felt like an hour. A nurse pushed clear fluid into the wound with a syringe until blood and dirt stopped appearing in the metal basin beneath my hand. The puncture had missed the tendon, though the surrounding tissue was badly bruised. I received stitches, antibiotics, a tetanus booster, and instructions to watch for heat, swelling, red streaks, fever, numbness, drainage, and about 10 other things that made sleep feel irresponsible. The knee was worse. No fracture, but the kneecap had dislocated and damaged cartilage when it shifted. I left in a rigid brace with crutches and a referral to an orthopedic specialist. 6 to 8 weeks, the doctor said. Till what? Until you're walking normally, assuming physical therapy goes well. What about work? He glanced at the dog bite, then at the knee brace. What kind of work? I almost laughed. The $450 Daniel had promised was still sitting in an envelope above the Mercer refrigerator. Nobody remembered it until 3 days later. A police officer returned it with my phone charger, the clean shirt I had left in the guest room, and one of Daniel's rubber gardening clogs. The other clog remained in the basement as evidence because it had blood on it. My mother drove from New Jersey the morning after the attack. She entered my apartment carrying groceries, 2 pillows, a heating pad, and enough resentment to fill every room. You should have called me before taking a job in a stranger's house. I didn't know they were dangerous. You didn't know they were. That applies to every stranger. Exactly. She slept on my couch for 5 nights. We argued about pain medication, showering alone, whether I needed a shower chair, and whether walking 3 steps to the bathroom without crutches counted as reckless behavior. It did. I fell once, catching myself against the wall with my stitched hand. After that, I let her help. That may not sound important, but it was. Before the Mercer house, accepting help felt like surrendering control. If I could monitor everything myself, then nothing could surprise me. If I checked the stove, the lock, the weather, the dog's breathing, the batteries in the flashlight, the route to the nearest hospital, then the worst thing would at least have to announce itself. The basement taught me the opposite. Control could be used against you. Thomas had known someone would help a trapped animal. Daniel had known I would respond to a failing pump. Rachel had written detailed instructions because detail made her feel safer. Every one of us had built habits around preventing disaster, and the disaster entered through those habits. The memory card survived. A detective told me that 2 weeks later, in a small interview room at the Stamford police station, his name was Detective Paul Breen, 51 years old and a man. With silver hair and reading glasses, he kept removing whenever he asked a difficult question. The card was old and partially corrupted. A digital forensics technician recovered several short video files from a basement security camera Daniel had installed after tools went missing during renovations. One clip showed Thomas entering through the bulkhead 5 years earlier. Another showed Baxter approaching him near the workbench. There was no audio. The final usable portion lasted 11 seconds. Thomas backed toward the stairs. Baxter followed, barking. Thomas kicked forward once. The dog fell out of frame. Daniel entered less than a minute later. The camera continued recording. Daniel went to the bottom of the stairs, knelt beside Baxter, and called someone. Then Thomas returned. The two men argued. Daniel pointed toward the camera. The clip ended before either man removed the card. It did not show them cleaning blood or replacing the stair tread. Those details came from Daniel after his arrest. "He's cooperating?" I asked. "Through counsel." "That means yes," with more expensive words. Breen almost smiled. Daniel admitted he had moved Baxter's body before Rachel returned home. He said Thomas had threatened to reveal financial fraud involving a construction business they once shared. Daniel had helped conceal the true circumstances of Baxter's death because he believed Thomas would ruin them. Later, he retrieved the memory card and hid it in Baxter's collar. "Why keep it in the house?" I asked. He said he couldn't destroy it, but he couldn't tell Rachel. That's what he says. Daniel was charged with unlawful restraint, evidence tampering, obstruction, reckless endangerment, and several related offenses. Prosecutors were still deciding how to handle his role in the original incident, given the time that had passed and the absence of direct evidence for some parts of his confession. Thomas faced more: burglary, assault, animal cruelty, false imprisonment, reckless endangerment, evidence tampering, resisting arrest. The list took long enough that Detective Breen turned a page. "What about the electricity?" I asked. Daniel says he reset the circuit from the kitchen because he thought the pump had to run before the basement flooded. He knew the extension strip was wet. "You told Rachel." "We don't know what Rachel told him." He came down with a pry bar. "Yes, to save the memory card. That appears to be part of it. Part of it." Police language left room around everything. Rachel gave her statement at the emergency veterinary clinic. Cooper survived. He had received nearly 3 times his prescribed sedative dose, enough to suppress his breathing, but not enough to kill him. He remained at the clinic for 2 nights on fluids and monitoring. Afterward, Rachel took him to stay with her sister in Massachusetts. She filed for divorce within a month. She wrote to me once. The message arrived at 2:13 in the morning and began with an apology. It was 9 paragraphs long. Rachel apologized for leaving me in the house, for not removing the old rules, for refusing to explain her family history, for telling herself Thomas was merely unstable and Daniel merely secretive. She said she had known Thomas hurt Baxter. Not how, but she had known. Baxter had a bruise beneath his ribs that Daniel could not explain. Thomas disappeared from family gatherings afterward. Daniel became defensive whenever she mentioned the basement camera. Rachel had accepted the story about a fall because the alternative required decisions she did not want to make. At the end, she wrote, "I thought rules could keep a house safe when the people inside it would not tell the truth." I read that sentence several times. Then I deleted the message, not because I hated her, because I knew I would keep rereading it if I didn't. Rufus presented a different problem. His microchip was registered to a woman in Bridgeport who had reported him stolen 8 months earlier. Thomas had apparently taken the dog from an unsecured yard and kept him at a rural property owned by a friend. Rufus's actual name was Milo. The animal control officer who had fed him turkey contacted me after the criminal case became public. Milo had been returned to his owner after quarantine and medical treatment. The torn nail healed. The bite report remained on file, but the circumstances were documented. I asked whether he was dangerous. The officer said he was terrified. That wasn't the same answer. It was probably the honest one. My own recovery moved more slowly than everyone predicted. The bite became infected despite the antibiotics. My hand swelled until I could barely separate my fingers, and I spent another night in the hospital receiving intravenous medication. The stitches left a curved scar below my thumb. My knee required surgery in December. By spring, I could climb stairs without holding the railing, but I still paused at basement doors. I stopped dog sitting. At first, I told clients I was taking time off. Then, I removed my profile from the app. The money had never been good enough to justify the mileage, the strange kitchens, the hidden keys beneath ceramic frogs, the owners who said their dogs were friendly and forgot to mention that friendly had conditions. I found work at a veterinary reception desk instead. That surprised everyone, including me. The clinic was bright, busy, and rarely quiet. Phones rang. Printers jammed. Dogs barked from exam rooms, each with a different pitch and rhythm. Owners arrived late and apologized, or arrived early and complained. The air smelled of disinfectant, wet fur, and coffee burned down to sludge. It felt ordinary. I liked that. There were other people nearby. Doors had windows. Medication was counted twice. When an animal reacted badly, nobody pretended not to see it. For several months, I checked every dog's breathing when it slept in the waiting room. Eventually, I stopped. Mostly. The Mercer house sold the following summer. I knew because a real estate listing appeared when I searched the address, which was something I had promised myself I would not do. The photographs showed new paint, polished floors, and an empty kitchen. The basement had been professionally cleaned. White walls, gray epoxy floor, new sump pump, new electrical outlets mounted higher above the concrete. The basement rules were gone. The box was gone. The brass latch remained. In one listing photograph, the basement door stood open to show the renovated stairs. Sunlight from the kitchen fell across the top 3 steps. I zoomed in. The stair tread Daniel admitted replacing was visible near the bottom. Its wood was slightly lighter than the others, even after refinishing. That should have been the detail that stayed with me. It was. On the right side of the photograph, beside the new dehumidifier, sat a stainless steel dog bowl. The house was empty. No furniture, no people, no dog mentioned in the listing. The bowl could have belonged to the real estate agent, a contractor, the photographer. It could have been left behind accidentally, like the old rules. There were dozens of explanations. I closed the listing. A week later, I opened it again. The photograph had been replaced. I never found out why. Most days, I don't think about the Mercer basement. Then a breaker trips at the clinic, and the lights drop out for half a second. Or a tag strikes the side of a metal water bowl. Once, twice, I look toward the sound. There is always a dog standing there, a living one, waiting to be helped. That's it for this nightmare. If you enjoyed it, please like the video, subscribe to Mia Horror Stories, and turn on notifications. It really helps keep the stories alive. And don't stop here. Dive into another one of our videos and keep the fear going. Hey everyone, this is Mia Horror Stories, and the title of today's horror story is I Work at a Theme Park, and the carousel horse keeps choosing new riders. For your comfort, the screen will stay black throughout the video, so you can relax without strain and just focus on the story. Make sure you stick around until the end. Sometimes the last few moments are the ones that stay with you the longest. The black horse stopped in front of the exit gate for the third time that afternoon, although the carousel platform had started from a different position each cycle. It wasn't impossible. The ride ran on an old chain-driven system, and the brake caught with enough variation that none of the animals landed in exactly the same place twice. Still, when the platform slowed and the horse came around again, glossy black head lowered, brass teeth showing through a painted grin, the little boy waiting at the gate pointed at it and said, "That one wants me. My name is Maya Ortiz, 27, female." And at the time, I had been working at Lake Eerie Adventure Park for 6 summers and 3 winters, which meant I had spent more of my adult life there than anywhere else. The park sat outside Erie, Pennsylvania, close enough to the lake that wind carried the smell of algae and wet stone through the employee lot on humid mornings. On clear days, from the top of the Ferris wheel, you could see the gray-blue line of Canada if you believed the operators who liked saying that to tourists. My official position was ride operations supervisor for the East Midway. In practice, that meant I covered bathroom breaks, handled angry parents, signed inspection sheets, found teenagers who had wandered away from their assigned rides, and tried to keep machines built before I was born from embarrassing the company in public. The carousel was called the Starlight Galloper. There was nothing especially starlit about it during the day. Its canopy had faded paintings of sailboats, swans, and women in long dresses standing beside fountains. Half the bulbs around the upper trim had been converted to LEDs, so they burned a hard white while the older incandescent bulbs glowed yellow. When the ride moved, the colors chased each other in uneven bands. The black horse was number 18. Its name, according to the brass plaque screwed into the platform, was Caesar. "Buddy, wait until we open the chain," I told the boy. He was maybe 6, wearing a Pittsburgh Pirates cap and holding both hands around the railing. His mother had one palm spread across his chest to keep him from ducking under. "I know," he said, without looking at me. "But that's my horse." The platform settled with a groan from underneath. The music ended halfway through a note. Our carousel organ was only decorative now. A speaker cabinet inside it played digital recordings. And sometimes the Bluetooth receiver cut out when too many phones crowded the signal. At the control booth, Ethan raised his eyebrows at me. Ethan Cole, 19, male, was a seasonal operator from Mill Creek who wore his uniform shirt, one size too large, and apologized even when someone else bumped into him. He had been assigned to the carousel because management considered it easy, which was unfair to both Ethan and the carousel. He had a nervous habit of checking the same latch twice, then a third time if he thought anyone was watching. I lifted the entrance chain. The boy ran directly to Caesar, not toward it generally, directly to it, slipping between two adults and ignoring a white rabbit, a gold-maned lion, and a pair of smaller horses positioned closer to the gate. His mother called after him, then gave me the exhausted smile of someone who had already negotiated about socks, breakfast, sunscreen, and whether funnel cake counted as lunch. "Sorry," she said. "You're fine." The boy grabbed Caesar's brass pole and planted one sneaker in the stirrup. His mother lifted him the rest of the way. Up close, the horse looked worse than it did from the booth. Its black paint had cracked along the neck, exposing thin beige lines beneath the varnish. Red glass jewels had been set into its bridle. One was darker than the other because somebody had replaced it with the wrong shade years ago. The saddle was painted burgundy, with gold leaves curling around the edges. The park's maintenance department repainted the carousel animals in rotation every winter, but Caesar had not been touched since before I started. Whenever I asked why, someone gave me a different answer. The carving was too fragile. The paint contained lead. The horse had historical value. The restoration company had lost the paperwork. Theme parks ran on explanations like that. The boy's mother pulled the lap belt across his waist. It clicked, then released. She tried again. Click, release. "I've got it," I said. I knelt beside Caesar and examined the buckle. The metal tongue looked slightly bent, probably from being stepped on. I pressed it firmly into the receiver until I felt the locking tab engage. The belt held. I tugged twice. "Can he still ride?" the mother asked. "Yeah. I'll mark it for maintenance after this cycle." The boy leaned forward and whispered into Caesar's wooden ear. "What did you tell him?" his mother asked. The boy smiled. "He already knows." The air around the carousel smelled of hot grease, cotton candy, and the cinnamon pretzels sold from the cart across the midway. Somewhere beyond the games, the steel coaster climbed its first hill, each anti-rollback tooth cracking under the train like a long plastic ruler dragged across a desk. I walked the platform, checking belts and reminding parents not to stand beside their children once the ride started. At the entrance, Ethan held the height stick against a little girl's head and looked relieved when she cleared the line. When everyone was secure, I stepped off and gave him a thumbs up. He closed the chain. "Clear to start," he said. The carousel jerked into motion. Caesar rose on its pole with the boy clinging to the brass. His mother stood outside the railing, filming through the bars. Every time the horse came around, the boy waved at her with both hands, despite my warning to hold on. Nothing happened. That should have settled it. The carousel made 4 complete rotations. The music played. The horses climbed and fell. A toddler cried because his father had placed him on the stationary bench instead of an animal. A woman near the exit checked her phone through the entire ride. Normal. Then the boy stopped waving. As Caesar passed the booth, he turned his head toward the empty space behind him. Not a quick glance. He twisted at the waist and stared at the rear of the saddle as though someone had spoken close to his ear. His mother lowered her phone. I stepped toward the railing. By the next rotation, he was facing forward again. The ride slowed. Its drive motor changed from a steady electric hum to a loose, chugging vibration under the platform. The scenery panels slid past one by one. Sailboat, fountain, swans, sailboat again. Caesar stopped at the exit gate. Ethan looked at me. I looked down at the painted alignment marks near the platform edge. The carousel did not have programmed stopping positions. When the operator released the run button, the brake engaged wherever the platform happened to be. Landing within a foot of the same spot 3 times was unusual. Landing with the same horse centered at the gate was harder to dismiss. Still explainable, though. Machines developed preferences. Worn gears settled into familiar positions. Brakes grabbed differently when hot. Platforms carried weight unevenly depending on where riders sat. Anyone who worked around old equipment learned that random usually meant too complicated to notice the pattern. I opened the exit chain. The boy's mother climbed onto the platform and reached for his belt. It came loose before she touched it. The metal tongue slipped from the buckle and struck the platform with a small, bright sound. His mother stared at me. "You said you checked that." "I did. You pulled it. Twice." The boy slid down from the saddle before either of us could stop him. "It picked me," he said. His mother caught his wrist. "Okay, we're done with that." She guided him away, one hand between his shoulders. He kept looking back at Caesar until they disappeared into the crowd near the balloon dart game. Ethan waited until they were gone. "Are we shutting down?" I climbed onto the platform and checked the belt. The receiver had a spring-loaded tab inside. I pressed it with my thumbnail. It resisted, then snapped back normally. "Tag the horse," I said. He reached into the booth for a red vinyl strap printed with "Do Not Ride" in white letters. When he brought it over, he looked at Caesar, but did not touch it. "You do it. Seriously. I don't like its face. All the horses have faces. Not like that one." I wrapped the red strap around Caesar's pole, blocking the saddle. Then I recorded the issue on the paper defect sheet because the park's maintenance app had been down since lunch. Horse 18 restraint disengaged after cycle. Remove from service pending inspection. I wrote the time. 3:42 p.m. My radio crackled. "Maya, East Supervisor." I lifted it from my belt. "Go for Maya." A burst of static came first. The park radios were old Motorola's with worn batteries and antennas that bent near the base. During crowded days, conversations from security, food service, and maintenance bled together. Then a woman's voice said, "We need you at Little Harbor." Guest injury. Copy. On my way. Little Harbor was the children's section on the far side of the Midway. I told Ethan to keep Caesar closed and run the rest of the carousel normally. He nodded too quickly. You'll come back as soon as I can. The injury turned out to be a scraped knee caused by a child climbing over a decorative fence. His father wanted an ambulance until he learned the first aid staff could not guarantee the hospital visit would be free. By the time I finished the report, found a manager to witness the father's refusal of transport, and replaced an operator who had started vomiting behind the pirate ship ride, 45 minutes had passed. The sky had changed while I was inside the first aid building. Clouds had rolled in from the lake, flattening the afternoon light. The air felt cooler, but the pavement still released stored heat through the soles of my shoes. I was halfway back to the carousel when my radio clicked. No voice, just 3 short bursts of static. Then Ethan said, "Maya," he was speaking quietly. "What's up? You need to come back. I'm coming." "No, like now." I started walking faster. "What happened?" There was a pause long enough that I checked the radio display to make sure the battery had not died. "I tagged the horse," he said. "I know, and I told people it was closed." "Okay, but this girl climbed onto it anyway." "Then stop the ride and get her off." I did. Another pause. The coaster train dropped behind the arcade buildings, and riders screamed in a long descending wave. Ethan said, "Her dad says she didn't climb onto it." I reached the carousel. The ride was stopped. Guests crowded near the entrance, some irritated, others curious. Ethan stood inside the gate beside a man in a blue polo shirt. The man had one hand locked around the forearm of a girl about 8 years old. The red "Do Not Ride" strap lay on the platform. It had not been unbuckled. It had been cut cleanly through the middle. The girl was seated on Caesar. Her name was Lucy Brennan, 8, female, which I learned moments later from her father. She wore a pink windbreaker tied around her waist and had a smear of blue shaved ice across her upper lip. She was not crying, but she looked dazed, blinking slowly at the horse's ears. Her father was Daniel Brennan, 41 male, a broad-shouldered man with sunburn along his nose, and the controlled, brittle voice of someone trying not to make a public scene. I turned around for maybe 5 seconds, Daniel said. She was beside me. Then she was up there. Did she go under the chain? I asked. No, sir. She had to enter the ride somehow. I understand how gates work. Lucy ran one hand along Caesar's cracked neck. Ethan pointed toward the control booth. I was watching the entrance. Daniel looked at him. Apparently not. Lucy, I said, keeping my voice gentle, how did you get on the horse? She did not answer. Her father squeezed her arm. Tell her. Lucy looked down at the belt fastened across her waist. The damaged buckle had locked again. It was waiting at the gate, she said. Daniel closed his eyes briefly. She means the horse was near the gate when we walked up. It wasn't, Ethan said. I glanced at him. He swallowed. It was on the far side when the last ride stopped. Number 18. I checked because of the tag. The carousel had not completed another cycle. I could see the control panel from where I stood. The green run button was dark. The key remained in the operating position, but Ethan wore the control key ring clipped to his belt, meaning nobody else could have started the ride without breaking into the booth. I stepped onto the platform. The floorboards gave slightly beneath my weight. Underneath, cooling metal ticked in irregular intervals. I checked Lucy's belt. It held. "Can you unlock it?" Daniel asked. I pressed the release. Nothing happened. I pressed harder. The button moved halfway, then jammed. Lucy looked over her shoulder toward the empty space behind the saddle. "What are you looking at?" I asked. She leaned toward me. "There's writing under his mane." A gust pushed through the open sides of the carousel, stirring old ticket stubs and napkins across the platform. Above us, the decorative bulbs flickered once as the park's electrical load shifted. Daniel said, "Get my daughter off that thing." I could cut the belt. Maintenance kept a rescue knife in the booth, and security could clear the crowd while we inspected the horse. That was the obvious choice, but Lucy had wrapped both arms around Caesar's neck. She pressed her cheek against the cracked black paint. "No," she said, "he hasn't picked yet." Behind me, Ethan whispered my name. I looked toward the dark space beneath Caesar's carved mane. From floor level, there was no way to see underneath it without climbing onto the saddle or removing the horse from its pole. My radio clicked again. 3 short bursts of static. Maintenance was calling to ask whether we needed a mechanic. Security wanted to know why a crowd was forming. And Daniel Brennan was one sharp sentence away from trying to tear his daughter free himself. I had 2 choices: cut the belt immediately and treat the situation as a mechanical failure, or shut down the entire carousel, evacuate the midway around it, and inspect whatever Lucy claimed was hidden beneath the horse's mane. I reached for the rescue knife. Then Lucy lifted her face from Caesar's neck and looked past me toward the entrance gate. A new group of children had gathered outside the railing. She pointed at one of them. "Not me," she said. "That one." The child Lucy pointed at was standing beside the entrance gate in a yellow raincoat, although it had not started raining yet. He looked about 7. Thin, dark hair cut unevenly over his ears. He held a stuffed shark under one arm and watched Caesar with the fixed attention children usually reserved for birthday cakes or animals behind glass. "Which one?" Daniel asked. Lucy kept pointing. "The boy." The boy's mother noticed and pulled him closer to her hip. I took the rescue knife from Ethan. "Everybody off the platform," I said. Daniel did not move. "My daughter first. I'm cutting the restraint." "You should have done that already." He was right, which made the irritation in his voice harder to ignore. I slid one hand between the belt and Lucy's stomach. The webbing had tightened enough to press a crease into her shirt, but not enough to restrict her breathing. I angled the hooked blade away from her and sawed through the strap. It took more pressure than I expected. The fibers stretched, squeaked against the metal, then separated with a soft, tearing sound. Daniel lifted Lucy down immediately. The moment her shoes touched the platform, the carousel lights went out. Not dimmed, out. The digital organ stopped in the middle of its idle melody. The ticket scanner at the entrance chirped once as its backup battery switched on. Across the midway, game booths and food stands went dark in sequence, followed by the sign above the arcade. The coaster lift hill stopped clacking. For half a second, the park seemed to hold its breath. Then people began shouting. The emergency speakers clicked overhead. "Attention," like eerie adventure park guests. We are experiencing a temporary interruption of electrical service. Please remain calm and follow instructions from park employees. A chorus of disappointed groans moved through the crowd. Somewhere near the bumper cars, a child started crying. Sky above the carousel had turned the flat green-gray color that usually came before hard rain. Ethan grabbed my sleeve. The platform moved. What? When the lights went out, it settled. No, it turned. The carousel was still now, but Caesar no longer faced the exit gate. It had rotated perhaps 3 feet clockwise. That could happen during a power loss. The electromagnetic brake required current to remain engaged, and the backup brake sometimes allowed a little rollback before locking. I knew that. Ethan should have known it too. But the movement had placed Caesar directly opposite the boy in the yellow raincoat. His mother was pulling him away. The boy resisted, dragging the soles of his sneakers across the pavement. Come on, Owen. I want that one. It's closed. He wants me. The same words. Not exactly, but close enough that Ethan heard it too. His grip tightened on my sleeve. Daniel carried Lucy through the exit gate. We're leaving. I need your information for the incident report, I said. You can get it from the ticket account. Sir, my daughter was trapped on a broken ride during a power outage. We are done. Lucy looked over his shoulder at Caesar. The horse's darker glass eye reflected the pale emergency light inside the control booth. She saw his name, Lucy said. Daniel pushed into the crowd. I almost followed him. Park procedure required a full guest statement after any restraint malfunction. We needed contact details, witness names, photographs, and a signed refusal if they declined medical evaluation. But another announcement came over the speakers. Ride operators initiate evacuation procedures. Supervisors report status by radio. My radio erupted with overlapping voices. East Supervisor, this is dispatch. Maintenance 2 to Kitty Coaster. Security requested at North Arcade. Possible lightning within 8 miles. I raised the radio. East Supervisor to dispatch. Starlight Galloper is unloaded. 1 restraint failure, no reported injury. Ride is out of service. Static swallowed the reply. The first raindrops struck the carousel roof. Slow, heavy taps on painted metal. I looked at Ethan. Get the guests under cover and lock both gates. What about the horse? It's not going anywhere. He stared at Caesar. Ethan. Right. He moved toward the entrance, clapping his hands and repeating the standard weather line. Folks, we need everyone to proceed toward the arcade or main restaurants. Please don't shelter beneath trees or ride structures. The crowd began to thin. The boy in the yellow raincoat was gone. I turned to the control booth. The analog emergency phone inside was connected to a separate copper line and sometimes worked when the radios failed. I stepped inside, picked it up, and heard a dial tone under a layer of crackling. Before I could call dispatch, someone pounded on the booth window. Neil Brennan stood outside. Lucy was no longer with him. I opened the door. Where is she? He demanded. For a moment, I thought he meant where should he take her for first aid. Then I saw his face. The anger had gone. What replaced it was worse, his mouth loose, eyes moving rapidly over the platform, the gates, the shrinking crowd. She was holding my shirt, he said. We got to the pretzel stand. The lights flickered, people pushed past us, and then she wasn't there. How long? Maybe 30 seconds. Did she go back toward the midway? I don't know. Did you check the restroom? She was right beside me. The old fear arrived before I had time to push it down. Not fear of the carousel, not even fear of an injured child, fear of losing someone in a crowd. When I was 14, my younger brother disappeared for 23 minutes at a county fair in Ohio. He had wandered behind a livestock barn because a man selling glow sticks told him there were puppies there. We found him before anything happened, but those 23 minutes lived in my body like an allergy. I could still remember the pressure behind my eyes, the county announcer mispronouncing his name, my mother digging her fingernails into my wrist, and asking how I had let go of his hand. I had been responsible for him. That was the part that stayed. It was also why I was good at my job, according to my manager. I counted children twice. I checked gates after other people checked them. I remembered shirt colors and shoe colors, and which parent had been drinking from an aluminum bottle that did not smell like soda. It was also why I sometimes froze when I should have delegated. I stepped out of the booth. Ethan locked down the ride. Nobody enters. He was closing the exit gate. What happened? Lucy is missing. Daniel turned on him. You let her back in? No. He hasn't left the gate, I said. Daniel shoved a hand through his hair. She was talking about this horse. She would come back here. She's not on the platform. Then check under it. The carousel platform sat roughly 3 feet above the concrete foundation, enclosed by decorative panels. Maintenance accessed the drive assembly through a waist-high door behind the organ cabinet. Guests could not reach it without climbing over the exterior railing and crossing the platform. At least, that was what I would have said before Lucy appeared on Caesar Unseen. I radioed security. East supervisor requesting immediate child search. Missing female, 8 years old, pink windbreaker tied at waist, blue shaved ice stain around mouth. Last seen near pretzel cart, East Midway. Dispatch answered through static. Copy, name, Lucy Brennan. Daniel gave me a sharp look, as if hearing her name over the park radio made the situation official in a way he hated. Time last seen, dispatch asked. Approximately 4:37. Guardians stay at last known location. Supervisor, check immediate area. Do not conduct confined space entry. That last instruction came automatically because the carousel was flagged in the system as having a sub-platform machinery compartment. I looked at the maintenance door. A small brass padlock usually secured it. The lock now hung open from the latch. Rain began striking the midway in earnest. Guests ran toward the arcade, bags and jackets held over their heads. Wind drove the water sideways beneath the carousel roof. The old canopy flexed with low metal pops. Ethan saw the open lock. I didn't touch that. When was it last checked? Opening. By who? Me and Ron. Ron was the morning mechanic. His signature should have been on the inspection sheet. I picked up the padlock. It was not broken. The shackle had been opened with a key. Does maintenance have copies? Daniel asked. Yes. So does somebody have her? We don't know that. You just said the lock was opened. I said maintenance has keys. And who else? I did not answer quickly enough. Supervisors had a ring of emergency keys in a locked cabinet inside operations. Security had a master set. Senior mechanics carried individual keys. There were probably old copies in desks, toolboxes, retired employees' kitchen drawers. Theme parks liked to present gates and locks as absolutes. They were not. They were layers, delays, ways to make unauthorized access inconvenient. Ethan crouched near the maintenance opening. Lucy. I grabbed the back of his shirt and pulled him away. Don't put your face there. He stood quickly. I was just calling. You don't know if the machinery is isolated. The power's out. Power can come back. A warning tone sounded across the midway. Not the public announcement system. A repeating electronic beep from the coaster control panel in the distance, indicating that backup power had restored part of the ride network. Lightning flashed beyond the parking lot. 3 seconds later, thunder rolled over the park. Daniel reached for the maintenance door. I blocked him. My daughter could be in there. And if you crawl into the drive assembly when power returns, she gets to watch you lose an arm. His face changed. I regretted the phrasing immediately, but he stopped reaching. I called maintenance on the emergency phone. This time I got through. Starlight Galloper, I said. I need electrical isolation and lockout. Missing child may have entered the machinery compartment. The dispatcher swore quietly. How? Access door was found unsecured. Do not enter. Main power is down, but generators are sequencing. We have intermittent energization across East Midway. How long for a mechanic? Crews are evacuating Coaster 2. 10 minutes minimum. 10 minutes. For a missing child, 10 minutes was both nothing and intolerable. Daniel heard. You expect me to wait 10 minutes. I expect you to stay alive. He stepped close enough that I could smell coffee and rain on his breath. You lost her. The words landed exactly where he could not have known to aim them. I didn't lose her. She disappeared at your ride. She disappeared while she was with you. Ethan said. Maya. Daniel's jaw tightened. I heard myself breathing too fast. That was another thing nobody mentioned in supervisor training. Parents in crisis did not want facts arranged correctly. They wanted the universe to return what it had taken, and every second it failed to do, that required someone to blame. I forced my voice lower. We're both wasting time. Daniel looked away first. I crouched outside the open maintenance door and used my phone flashlight. The beam reached a narrow service passage beneath the platform. Steel braces crossed the space. Grease darkened the central drive shaft. Bundles of cables ran overhead, and the wooden floor above vibrated faintly as rain struck the canopy. A child could fit. An adult would have to crawl. Near the threshold lay a pink plastic bead. Lucy wore no visible jewelry that I remembered, but the color matched the drawstring ends on her windbreaker. I photographed it before touching it, then picked it up with a folded incident report envelope. Daniel saw it. That's hers. You're sure? She has beads on her jacket. Ethan leaned toward the opening again. Lucy, this time we heard something. A knock, not from deep under the ride, from above us. One solid tap against wood, then 2 more. Daniel dropped to his knees. Lucy, the carousel platform shifted. It moved less than an inch, but the drive chain clanked beneath the floor. I stood and backed everyone away. The emergency bulbs along the canopy flickered on, half burned white, half yellow, making the horses appear to jump between two kinds of light. The digital organ powered up with a burst of feedback. A distorted fragment of music played, slowed and low, then stopped. "Generators are coming online," I said. The carousel control booth was still supposed to be locked out by the operator key. Ethan's keys remained clipped to his belt, but electrical restoration could energize auxiliary systems before the drive controls stabilized. I radioed dispatch again. "Possible child beneath carousel. Evidence at access point. I need security and maintenance now. Copy, security en route. How far? No answer." Daniel moved around me. "I'm going in." I caught his arm. He pulled free. "Touch me again and a child screamed from somewhere beyond the carousel. We all turned. It came from the service lane behind the ride, separated from the midway by a wooden privacy fence. The lane was used by maintenance carts and food delivery trucks. Guests had no reason to be there. Daniel ran. I followed, with Ethan behind us. We reached the employee gate at the rear of the carousel. It was secured by a keypad. I entered the 4-digit code. Red light. I tried again. Red. "The outage reset it," Ethan said. Daniel gripped the top of the 6-foot fence. "Don't climb," I said. He hauled himself upward anyway. The wet wood gave him no purchase. His shoe slipped, and his chin struck the upper rail with a blunt knock. He dropped to the pavement, landing on one knee. Blood appeared along the edge of his lower lip. "I'm fine," he said before either of us asked. I used my supervisor key on the manual cylinder beside the keypad. The key entered, but would not turn. Something had been broken off inside the lock. Not rusted, not jammed. Broken. Beyond the fence, the service lane was dim beneath the storm clouds. Rainwater streamed toward the drains, carrying leaves, ticket fragments, and pale curls of wood shavings. Then came the scream again. Closer. Dad. Daniel slammed both palms against the gate. Lucy. A figure moved behind the carousel's rear panels. Small, pink at the waist. Daniel started climbing again. This time, I did not stop him. I cupped my hands for his shoe and pushed. He got one leg over the top, dropped into the service lane, and nearly fell when his injured knee buckled. I climbed after him. The top rail pressed into my ribs. My wet shoe slipped once, and for a second I was 14 again, standing beside an empty livestock pen while my mother asked where my brother had gone. Then Ethan grabbed my ankle from below and steadied me. I swung over and landed hard enough to sting both heels. "Stay there," I told him. "I'm not staying. You are the only employee who knows this ride is unsecured. Guard the gate and direct security." He looked toward the dark service lane, then nodded. Daniel was already limping toward the rear of the carousel. I caught up near a row of dented trash compactors. Rain drummed on their metal lids. The air smelled of wet cardboard, fryer oil, and ozone. "Lucy," he shouted. No response. Behind the carousel, another maintenance hatch stood open. This one was larger than the front access door and led into the central machinery bay. A yellow warning label on the frame read, "Danger, automatic equipment. Lock out all energy sources before entry." The padlock lay in a puddle. Beside it was Lucy's pink windbreaker. Daniel picked it up. One of the plastic beads was missing from the drawstring. He looked at me. "She's inside." The carousel motor started. Not fully. The machinery gave a deep electrical hum, then stopped, then hummed again as unstable generator power tried to engage the system. From inside the open hatch came the scrape of movement over concrete, a child's breathing, and another sound underneath it, an adult voice, low enough that I could not make out the words. Daniel dropped the jacket and crawled toward the opening. I grabbed him by the belt. He turned on me, wild-eyed. "You heard her." "I heard someone. That's my daughter." The motor hummed again, longer this time. Above us, the carousel platform began to rotate. Slowly, inside the machinery bay, a small hand appeared around the edge of a steel support. Lucy's voice came through the darkness. "Maya," I released Daniel. Then the hand vanished, pulled sharply backward. The adult voice said, clearly now, "Close the door." And somewhere inside the carousel, metal slammed against metal. Daniel went through the rear hatch before I could stop him. He dropped to his stomach, shoved both arms into the machinery bay, and wriggled forward until only his legs remained outside. His injured knee dragged across the metal threshold. "Lucy," he shouted, "grab my hand." The carousel motor hummed again. I caught Daniel by the ankle and pulled. He kicked backward on instinct. "Let go of me. The drive is live. She's right there." She was right there. That distinction mattered. It did not help. I lowered myself beside the hatch and aimed my phone flashlight inside. The machinery bay was wider than the front service passage, but much lower than it looked from outside. The floor sat about 18 inches below the threshold. A central steel shaft rose through the middle, surrounded by a circular gear housing the size of a dining table. Radial support beams ran outward beneath the platform like spokes. The opening where Lucy's hand had appeared was on the far side of the central housing, maybe 12 feet away. Between us and that point ran a narrow strip of concrete, no wider than 2 feet. On the right, greasy chain and sprocket assemblies moved in short, jerking increments whenever the motor energized. On the left, cables drooped from metal brackets. Water dripped through gaps in the platform and struck the floor in steady, dark spots. There was no clean route through. Daniel twisted to look back at me. "I can fit. That isn't the problem." "Maya," his voice broke on my name. I wanted to say I understood. I did understand. That was the problem too. I lifted the radio. "East supervisor to dispatch. We have confirmed child and unknown adult inside the rear machinery bay. Intermittent drive engagement. Need immediate master power isolation." "Copy," dispatch said. "Electrical reports generator instability. They're attempting a remote shutdown." "Attempting. Stand by." Another burst of static cut through the reply. Daniel laughed once, without humor. "Stand by." The motor engaged. The central housing shuddered. A chain tightened with a metallic snap. Above us, the carousel rotated several inches, and one of the radial beams passed over the space where Daniel's shoulders had been. I pulled hard on his ankle. He slid backward over the threshold, cursing. A wooden support dropped into view inside the bay and struck the concrete with a crack. Daniel scrambled out. "What was that?" he asked. I leaned closer. The support had not fallen. It was a carousel horse pole traveling downward as its animal descended overhead. The bottom linkage moved through a cam track beneath the platform, lifting and lowering each horse during rotation. If Daniel had been farther inside, the mechanism could have pinned him against the floor. Jesus, he said, that's why we wait for lockout. We don't have time to wait. From inside the bay, Lucy cried out. Dad, Daniel surged forward again. I blocked him with both forearms. Lucy, I shouted into the hatch. Stay away from anything metal. Crawl toward my voice if you can. A pause. Then I can't. Are you hurt? No. Is somebody holding you? No answer. I looked at Daniel. His face had gone gray beneath the sunburn. Lucy, he said, who's with you? The adult voice came from deeper inside. You need to stop the ride. I could not tell whether it belonged to a man or woman. The machinery distorted it, carrying sound through the hollow platform and breaking words apart. Who are you? I asked. Stop the ride. We're trying. Bring Lucy to the opening. You'll start it. I'm not at the controls. Somebody always starts it. Daniel crouched near the hatch. You touch my daughter and I will come in there. The voice stopped. The only sounds were rain on the canopy and the irregular tick of cooling metal. Then something moved behind us. Daniel spun. A tall shape crossed between the dumpsters at the far end of the service lane. For 1 second, it looked like a person in a long black coat carrying a child. Daniel ran toward it. Hey, I followed. The service lane ran east to west behind the carousel. To our right, it dead-ended at a concrete retaining wall beside the coaster supports. To our left, it continued 70 yards toward the food warehouse and employee parking gate. Dumpsters and rolling supply cages narrowed the path. The shape moved behind a blue trash compactor. Daniel rounded the corner first. He stopped so suddenly that I nearly ran into him. A torn section of black vinyl had peeled loose from the compactor cover. Wind lifted and dropped it against a wheeled sack of stuffed prizes. A giant plush dolphin protruded from the sack, its gray nose and white belly visible beneath the vinyl. Daniel kicked the cover aside. The dolphin toppled onto the wet pavement. No person, no child. His breathing came in harsh pulls. I saw someone. You saw that. I saw somebody carrying her. I saw movement too. You don't have to talk to me like I'm losing it. I'm not. He wiped rain from his eyes with both palms. Blood from his split lip had run down his chin. His right knee was swelling beneath his shorts. The employee gate behind us rattled. Ethan's voice came through the fence. Maya, we ran back. He had managed to force the gate open by removing the hinge pin with a multi-tool from the carousel booth. The gate now leaned crookedly inward, held by one lower hinge. 2 security officers entered behind him. Renee Walsh, 34, female, was the park's afternoon security supervisor, a former county dispatcher with close-cropped blonde hair, and a way of speaking that made every sentence sound like an instruction, even when it was a question. Beside her was Marcus Bell, 22, male, a seasonal security officer who looked winded from running, and kept one hand near the radio microphone on his shoulder. Renee took in Daniel's bloodied face, the open machinery hatch, and Lucy's jacket on the ground. Where is the child? Inside, I said. Unknown adult with her. Did you see the adult? No. Hear them? Yes. Any weapon mentioned? No. Daniel stepped between us. Why are we talking? Renee looked at him. Because sending 4 more people into moving machinery will not improve your daughter's odds. She's been in there for Marcus, call county dispatch. Possible abduction, confined mechanical space. Request police and fire rescue. Marcus moved away, one hand pressed to his earpiece. Renee crouched at the rear hatch, but kept back from the threshold. Lucy Brennan, she called. My name is Renee. Can you hear me? No reply. She glanced at me. How do we isolate the ride locally? Main disconnect is in the front control booth. Secondary breaker is in the electrical cabinet on the north side, beside the organ housing. Can either be locked? Yes. Do it. That was our first real attempt. Renee kept Daniel at the rear hatch, while Ethan and I circled the carousel in opposite directions. I took the north side, squeezing between the outer railing and a concession storage cage that had rolled loose in the wind. Ethan went around through the midway. The public area looked abandoned now. Rain swept across the pavement in silver bands. Paper cups floated near blocked drains. Emergency lights burned above the arcade entrances, and recorded announcements told guests to remain indoors. At the carousel, Caesar stood almost directly over the front maintenance access. Its pole was at the bottom of its cycle, the horse lowered close to the platform. The red glass eyes reflected my flashlight. I ignored them. The electrical cabinet was mounted beneath the platform trim behind the decorative organ. I unlocked it with my supervisor key and opened the door. 3 breaker handles sat inside. One was labeled lighting. One was labeled audio AUX. The third should have read main drive. Its label had been peeled away. I found the breaker in the down position anyway, already off. That meant the motor should not have been energizing. I radioed Ethan. Check the booth disconnect. A few seconds later, he answered. Main switch is off. Confirm. Red handle down, tagged out with the morning inspection tag. The motor hummed beneath my feet. I stepped back from the cabinet. The sound lasted 4 seconds, then faded. Not the main motor, I realized. Something else. An auxiliary motor, possibly the air compressor used for the pneumatic brake release, or the hydraulic pump added during a refurbishment. Our shutdown had been partial at best. The ride's modifications were layered across decades, and the cabinet diagram taped inside the door had yellowed until half the ink was unreadable. I called maintenance. Local main drive and booth disconnect are both off, but we still have energized equipment. A mechanic answered this time. Carousel has a separate auxiliary feed from the midway utility panel. Where? South service room. That's under the old photo kiosk. Correct. The old photo kiosk had been converted into storage 2 seasons ago. It sat on the opposite side of the midway, beyond the evacuated bumper car pavilion. How long until you get here? 7 minutes. I closed the cabinet. 7 more minutes. A hard knock sounded beneath the platform. Then 3 rapid knocks. Lucy. I ran back to the service lane. Daniel was kneeling at the hatch, shouting into it. Renee held the back of his shirt to keep him from crawling inside. What happened? I asked. She screamed, Daniel said. Renee looked at me. we heard banging. "Lucy," I called, "we've shut off the main drive. We're working on the auxiliary feed." The adult voice answered, "You didn't shut it off. We know there's another feed." A harsh laugh came from inside, not amused, exhausted. "Of course there is. Who are you?" No reply. Renee lowered her voice. "Can you come to the opening? I can't leave her. Is Lucy injured?" "No. Are you?" Silence. Then, "Not yet." Renee looked at me. I could see what she was thinking. The unknown adult might not be an abductor. They might be trapped too. Daniel did not accept that possibility. "Bring her out," he said, "right now." A metal clang came from inside. Lucy shouted. The motor or auxiliary pump began again. Longer this time. The platform rotated nearly a foot. Inside the machinery bay, the horse linkages started moving in sequence. One pole dropped. Another rose. Steel rollers traveled along the cam track with a grinding sound that vibrated through the hatch frame. Then the noise stopped. "Lucy," Daniel shouted. No answer. Our first attempt had failed because we had isolated only part of the system. The second attempt was faster and worse. Renee sent Marcus with Ethan to the South Service room while she stayed with Daniel and me. Marcus radioed updates as they crossed the midway. Passing bumper cars. Static. Photo kiosk door is locked. Ethan said something in the background. Then Marcus. Supervisor key doesn't fit. I knew why. That kiosk uses a food service cylinder, I said. Different keyway. Renee pressed her radio button. Force entry. A minute passed. Rainwater ran from my hair into my collar. My thighs cramped from crouching. Daniel's hands shook every time he reached toward the hatch. Marcus came back over the radio, breathing hard. Door open. Utility panel has 6 breakers. Labels are damaged. "Send a picture," I said. He did. The image arrived blurred by rain and poor signal. 6 black breaker handles in a rusted panel. Handwritten labels beside them, most smeared beyond recognition. One looked like photo. One red bump. Another might have been car AUX, but the first word was obscured by a strip of old tape. "Throw the suspected carousel auxiliary," I said. Renee looked at me. "Suspected? We don't have a better option." Daniel said, "Do it." Marcus flipped the breaker. The carousel lights died. So did the emergency bulbs along the South Midway. Then the sound of industrial ventilation stopped from somewhere beneath us. A warning alarm began beeping inside the machinery bay. The adult voice swore. "What did you cut?" I asked. "You killed the fan. A ventilation fan." That explained the separate feed. The machinery compartment had limited airflow, especially with the access panels closed. In summer, heat collected beneath the platform. During normal maintenance, crews opened both hatches and used portable blowers. Now one hatch was open, but the storm pushed damp air inward rather than drawing fumes out. "What's in there?" Renee asked. "Grease, electrical equipment, maybe battery backup, and exhaust," she asked me. "No combustion engine." The adult voice shouted, "There's a leaking can." "What kind of can?" No answer. Then I smelled it, sharp, sweet, chemical, not gasoline, solvent. Maintenance used aerosol degreaser and adhesive remover beneath rides. In an enclosed space, concentrated vapors could cause dizziness, vomiting, or loss of consciousness. "Lucy," I called. "Are you feeling sick?" Her reply came weakly. My head hurts. Daniel made a sound deep in his throat. Our second attempt had shut down the wrong circuit and created a new problem. Turn the fan back on, I told Marcus. The lights returned. The ventilation hum resumed beneath the platform. So did the carousel's auxiliary system. A linkage moved. Something heavy struck metal inside. The adult cried out. This time, there was no mistaking the pain. Renee raised the radio. Fire Rescue Ada, Marcus answered from the kiosk. County says 8 to 12 minutes. Park maintenance is almost there. Daniel shook his head. She doesn't have 12 minutes. Neither did the adult, judging from that scream. I flattened myself beside the hatch and pushed my phone farther inside, using the camera to see around the central housing. The live image shook on the screen. Concrete floor, steel support, grease, then Lucy's shoe. She sat with her back against the far wall, knees pulled to her chest. A man crouched beside her. He wore dark maintenance coveralls. One leg was trapped beneath a descending horse linkage. Steel arm had pinned his ankle against the edge of the cam track. His face was turned away, but I could see thinning gray hair and a strip of blood along his cheek. He had one hand wrapped around Lucy's wrist. Daniel saw the screen. That's Ron, Ethan's morning mechanic. Ronald Pike, 58 male, had worked at the park for more than 30 years. He rarely spoke during inspections and had the permanent stoop of someone who spent too much time beneath machines. Renee leaned closer. You know him? Know him, I said. He signed the carousel inspection this morning. Daniel pointed at Ron's hand on Lucy. Get him off her. On the screen, Ron looked toward the phone. His face was pale and wet with sweat. She crawled in through the front, he said. I came after her. Why didn't you call anyone? My radio fell into the drive pit. Why were the locks open? Ron's eyes shifted. Not now. That answer tightened every part of me. Move Lucy toward us. I can't. You don't need to move. Let go of her. She'll crawl into the track. Lucy's free hand rested inches from a moving roller assembly. Ron was not holding her captive. He was keeping her still. The terrifying possibility we had built around the unknown adult collapsed into something more ordinary and somehow worse. An injured mechanic trapped beside a child in machinery he knew could restart. Daniel saw it too. His anger lost direction. What do we do? He asked. I studied the video. Route from the hatch to Lucy was blocked by the central gear housing and the active linkages. The only safer path would be from the front access door, through the narrow service passage. But Caesar's lowered pole and the cam mechanisms crossed that route. We need the auxiliary feed off and the fan running, I said. Renee understood. Separate circuits, except the panel labels are wrong. A maintenance cart skidded into the service lane. Two mechanics jumped out with lockout equipment and insulated gloves. Before they reached us, lightning struck somewhere close enough to turn the entire carousel white. The thunder came at once. The park generators dropped offline. Every light vanished. The ventilation fans stopped. The carousel platform released with a heavy mechanical clunk. Gravity took over. The sloped cam track allowed the platform to roll backward. Inside the bay, Ron shouted. I saw the carousel moving in the darkness, the pale animals sliding past the service lane opening. Then the rear hatch door swung inward, driven by the rotating frame. Its edge struck the outer panel and bounced toward us. Renee grabbed Daniel and pulled him back. The door slammed shut. A steel locking bar dropped across it from the inside as the carousel shifted. We heard Lucy scream behind the sealed panel. One of the mechanics ran to the front access. His flashlight beam swept across the platform. "Front hatch is blocked," he shouted. "Horse linkage is down across the passage." The carousel rolled another 6 inches. A decorative support beam moved between us and the employee gate, crushing the lower hinge Ethan had loosened. The gate folded inward against the fence. Our route back to the midway closed. Behind us, at the east end of the service lane, water surged over the retaining wall drain and spread across the pavement. A transformer popped somewhere near the food warehouse. Blue light flashed. Then came the smell of burning insulation. The mechanic beside me looked toward the rising water, then at the sealed carousel hatch. "Everybody out of the lane," he said. "We can't," Renee answered. The gate was crushed shut. The west route toward the warehouse was already filling with runoff, and fallen electrical cables had dropped across the pavement beyond the dumpsters. The carousel had sealed Lucy and Ron inside. The storm had sealed the rest of us behind it. And with the power fully gone, the ventilation fan would not restart. The mechanic nearest me was named Tom Alvarez, 46, male, a broad man with a shaved head and a gray park jacket darkened by rain. He crouched beside the sealed rear hatch and pressed both hands against the panel. "Don't force it," he said. "The locking bar is tied to the rotating frame. We pry wrong, we could shift the whole assembly." Daniel shoved beside him. "Then tell me what to do." Tom looked at the second mechanic. Claire Novick, 39, female, was smaller, red-haired, and already pulling insulated tools from a waterproof case. She had a flashlight clenched between her teeth. "We need to stop the rollback," she said. "How?" Renee asked. "Manual chock at the drive ring. Can you reach it? Not from here." I remembered the north electrical cabinet, the yellowed diagram, the sloped cam track, the phone video showing the central housing and the narrow concrete strip. "The front hatch," I said. Tom shook his head. "Blocked by Caesar's linkage. So the horse is at the bottom of its cycle. If we raise the pole manually, it opens the passage." Tom stared at me through the rain. "That assembly weighs hundreds of pounds. The horse doesn't. The linkage does." Ethan stepped closer. "There's a maintenance jack in the carousel booth." Everyone looked at him. He swallowed. "Ron showed me during opening. A screw jack for changing pole rollers." The booth was on the public side of the crushed employee gate. Renee glanced at the folded metal and broken hinge. "Can you fit through?" The gate had collapsed diagonally against the fence, leaving a narrow, triangular gap near the pavement. Ethan dropped to his knees and looked. "Maybe." "No," Daniel said. "He's a kid." "I'm 19, Ethan said. "You're shaking." "So are you." Daniel took one step toward him. Renee moved between them. "We don't have time for this." Another faint scream came from inside the carousel. "Lucy." Then coughing. The solvent smell had strengthened, seeping through seams around the hatch. Sweet and metallic, like paint thinner left in a hot garage. Tom pressed his ear near the panel. "Ron, a muffled voice answered. Still here. How's the girl? Awake. How's your leg? A pause. Not good. Tom's jaw moved. Can you see the leaking can? Under the gear housing. Can you reach it? No. Claire looked toward the rising water at the west end of the lane. Fallen wires lay beyond the dumpsters, sparking intermittently where they touched the flooded pavement. We could not go that way. The retaining wall trapped us on the east. The crushed gate was the only path to the public side. Ethan had already removed his radio and belt. I can fit. I grabbed his shoulder. Once you're through, stay away from the platform edge. Get the jack, the long crank, and the steel maintenance pins. His face tightened. Which pins? Red rack inside the booth. There are 3 sizes. Tom raised 2 fingers. 3/4 inch. Bright steel. Grab all 4. Ethan nodded. He went flat on the pavement and pushed his arms into the gap. The fence pressed against his back. A torn strip of gate metal caught his shirt. Renee crouched and bent it upward while Marcus held the gate as steady as he could. Ethan exhaled and slid forward. For a second, his chest stuck. I can't. Yes, you can, I said. The words came out harder than I intended. He shut his eyes, breathed out again, and twisted one shoulder through. Metal scraped across his ribs. Then he was gone. We heard him stand on the other side. I'm okay. Go, Renee said. His shoes slapped across the wet midway. Inside the carousel, something knocked 3 times. Not Lucy this time. Ron. He had found a rhythm. Still conscious. Tom crouched beside the seam. We're working on the front passage. Ron gave no answer. Daniel pressed both palms against the hatch. Lucy, keep talking to me. I'm tired, she said from inside. I know, Bug. I want Mom. Daniel closed his eyes. She's waiting for you. That might have been true. It might not. We had never heard him mention Lucy's mother. His hands began to shake harder. I crouched beside him. Keep her awake. He looked at me. What do I say? Anything normal. His mouth opened, but nothing came. I knew that blankness. Panic made simple things inaccessible. What did she eat for breakfast? He blinked. Pancakes. Ask her what was on them. He leaned toward the hatch. Lucy, what did you put on your pancakes? No answer. His face collapsed. Then her voice came back, faint and annoyed. Sprinkles. Daniel laughed once, and the laugh broke halfway out. Too many sprinkles. You said vacation rules. I did. That gave us a minute. A small one. Ethan returned carrying the screw jack against his chest, the long crank dragging behind him. He slid the tools through the gap first. Steel pins clanged onto the pavement. Then he tried to come back. The collapsed gate shifted. Marcus grabbed the upper rail. Don't move. I'm not moving. The fence leaned farther inward. Renee braced one boot against the post. Ethan, feet first. He lowered himself and pushed his legs through. The gate dropped half an inch. He screamed. The metal had trapped his right hand against the pavement. Marcus and Renee lifted together. I reached through the gap, found Ethan's wrist, and pulled. His hand came free. He rolled into the service lane, clutching it to his chest. 2 fingers were bent at wrong angles. He stared at them. No, he whispered. Don't look, Claire said. She wrapped the hand quickly with a folded shop towel and taped it against his palm. You're done. He shook his head. You got what we needed, I said. He looked at me as if that were worse. Tom and I carried the jack to the front side of the carousel by following the narrow strip between the outer panels and the fence. We could not reach the public entrance, but there was a smaller inspection slot on the northeast quarter of the ride. Tom removed 6 screws with a cordless driver. The panel came away. Inside, Caesar's vertical pole stood low, its bottom linkage resting across the front service passage. The black horse itself was directly above us on the platform. Up close, beneath the ride structure, its carved hooves looked blunt and heavy. Tom positioned the screw jack beneath the linkage. If the jack slips, it drops. How high do we need? 8 inches. Then pin it if the holes align. And if they do, he looked at me, don't be under it. We began turning the crank. The jack resisted immediately. Metal squealed above us. Caesar rose slowly along its pole. 1 inch, 2. The linkage shifted. The carousel rolled a fraction backward. Inside the sealed bay, Ron shouted, "Stop." Tom released the crank. Everything settled. "What happened?" I called. The arm moved on my leg. We had lifted the linkage, but the connected cam system had transferred movement around the ride. Claire came beside us and studied the exposed mechanism. "We need to chock the drive ring first." "You said we couldn't reach it," I said. "Not from outside. There was only one way left. Someone had to enter through the front once the passage opened enough, crawl to the drive ring, and place the steel pins manually." Tom looked at the gap. "I'll go." "You're too wide," Claire said. "I can make it." "You won't clear the braces." They both looked at me. I was smaller than Tom, larger than Ethan, and I knew the interior layout from my phone video. My throat tightened. I could feel my mother's fingers around my wrist again. 23 minutes at a county fair stretched across years, asking how I had let my brother disappear. I had built my whole adult life around never being the person who lost someone. Now a child was inside a machine I supervised. "Show me where the pins go," I said. Daniel turned. "No," I almost laughed. "You don't get to tell me no. If you get stuck too, then don't let the jack move." Tom explained quickly. The drive ring encircled the central housing. 4 maintenance holes should align with fixed brackets at quarter intervals. I needed only 1 pin to stop rollback, 2 to make it safe enough for extraction. "Do not put your hands between gear teeth," Claire said. "Do not cross under a horse pole. If anything moves, flatten against the concrete and protect your head." Comforting. "Maya, I heard you." Tom cranked again. The linkage rose, 3 inches, 4. At 5, the front passage opened enough for me to crawl beneath. He slid in the first temporary support pin through the linkage bracket. It did not seat fully. "That's all we get," he said. I lowered myself through the inspection opening. The smell hit harder inside. Solvent, grease, wet wood, hot wiring. My elbows landed in black grit. The space was lower than it looked on video. Steel braces crossed inches above my back. Every sound was amplified. Rain, coughing, Daniel shouting through the rear panel. I crawled forward. Caesar's pole linkage hung above the passage, supported by the jack and 1 badly seated pin. I passed beneath it. Slowly. My radio scraped against the floor, so I unclipped it and pushed it ahead. The central housing rose in front of me. To the right, the drive ring's teeth vanished into darkness. Found the first maintenance hole. It was 3 inches out of alignment. "Tom," I called, "need the platform forward slightly. No power, manual movement. Risk to Ron." "Ron heard us. Do it," Daniel shouted from outside. "No," Ron's voice came stronger. "The pressure's already cutting circulation. Move it." Tom and Claire used pry bars against the outer drive rim. The carousel shifted. 1 inch. Ron screamed. The sound passed through the structure and came out everywhere. I nearly backed away. Then the holes aligned. I drove the first steel pin through the bracket. It stopped halfway. I hit it with the heel of my hand. Nothing. I used Ethan's multi-tool like a hammer. Once, twice. The pin seated. First pin in. The carousel stopped creeping. For the second pin, I had to crawl around the central housing. That brought me within sight of Lucy and Ron. Lucy sat against the far wall, face pale, eyes wet. Ron's leg disappeared beneath a steel linkage below the knee. Work boot had twisted sideways. Blood darkened the concrete beneath it. He was holding a red aerosol can against his chest. "The leak?" I asked. He nodded. "I got it upright." That explained why the fumes had not become worse. "Can Lucy reach me?" "Not without crossing the track." The second bracket sat beyond Ron's trapped leg. I would have to pass him. He saw me calculate it. Go over my shoulders. "There's no room." "Then use me." Lucy started crying. "I don't want him to die." Ron looked at her. "Neither do I." A short silence followed. Then he looked at me. The locks were open because I opened them. I stared at him. Why? I'd been letting kids sit on Caesar after hours. What? Photos. $5 cash. Parents liked the old horse, the cut strap, the open padlocks, the children who said it picked them. "They weren't picked," I said. "I told them they were." The words felt uglier inside the cramped dark. "You told children the horse chose them. It kept them still for pictures." "What's under the mane?" "My booking marks." I remembered Lucy saying there was writing. Names, initials, dates. Which kid was next? The carousel had not been choosing riders. Ron had. A private side business hidden inside an old ride, dressed up as magic, because children believed magic faster than adults believed negligence. Why did Caesar stop at the gate? Brake drift. I adjusted the cam last winter so it would land close for photos. And the restraint. Worn latch. I was supposed to replace it. Daniel heard enough through the hatch to understand. "You knew." Ron closed his eyes. I signed it off. The story became simple. Not harmless. Simple. Old machinery, deferred repair, secret cash. A mechanic who manipulated the stopping point and told children a horse had chosen them. A little girl who recognized the ritual and crawled inside looking for the names under the mane. Every unsettling detail had a human hand behind it. I crawled over Ron, groaned when my knee pressed against his shoulder. The second bracket was inches beyond the trapped linkage. I aligned the pin. Outside, thunder hit. The carousel jolted. The temporary support at Caesar's linkage slipped. Tom shouted. The pole dropped. Behind me, metal crashed into the front passage. My retreat disappeared. The inspection opening was blocked. Point of no return, no way back. "Second pin," Claire shouted. I drove it down with the multi-tool. Once, twice. It seated. The drive ring locked. "Secured," I yelled. Tom and Claire attacked the rear hatch with pry bars. With the frame immobilized, the locking bar could no longer shift. Metal bent. The hatch opened 6 inches, then 12. Fresh air pushed into the bay. Daniel reached through. Lucy, Ron released her wrist. She crawled, fast at first, then slower when she reached the track. I guided 1 foot over the roller channel, hands on my shoulders. She climbed onto me. I carried her on my back toward the rear opening, crawling over Ron a second time. The hatch widened. Daniel dragged Lucy out and wrapped himself around her. For one breath, the bay felt almost quiet. Then Ron said, "My leg." We could not leave him. Tom entered from the rear with a hydraulic spreader. Claire followed with cribbing blocks. They stabilized the linkage, lifted it 2 inches, then 3. Ron screamed until no sound came out. His boot stayed trapped. His foot did not. When they pulled him free, the angle of his lower leg told me the damage before anyone said it. Compound fracture, crushed ankle, maybe worse. We dragged him through the rear hatch on a maintenance mat. I came out last. The rain had eased. County fire crews had reached the public side, but could not cross the flooded west lane. They cut through the fence near the gate and passed us rescue boards. No sudden miracle, just enough access, too late to prevent the damage. Ethan sat against the retaining wall with his injured hand held to his chest. Daniel held Lucy beneath his jacket. Ron lay on the pavement, staring at Caesar through the carousel panels. The black horse remained raised above the platform, supported crookedly by the failed jack and damaged linkage. One red glass eye had fallen out. It rested near the drain beside Ron's open padlock. He looked at it, then at me. I didn't mean for anyone to get hurt. I was too tired to answer politely, meant to keep it hidden. Firefighters lifted him onto the board. As they carried him away, Lucy spoke into Daniel's chest. He said I was next. Daniel looked at Ron. Ron turned his face away. The immediate danger was over. Lucy was alive. Ron was alive. The carousel was pinned and powerless. But Ethan's fingers were broken. Daniel could barely stand on his swollen knee. My ribs burned from the fence, and both forearms were striped with grease and shallow cuts. The park lights remained dark. Rainwater carried Caesar's red glass eye toward the drain. I stepped on it before it disappeared. Not because it mattered, because after everything, I could not stand to watch one more thing vanish. The first ambulance took Lucy. The second took Ron. Ethan left in the third, sitting upright on the stretcher with his injured hand packed in ice and his face turned toward the dark carousel as if he expected it to move again. I stayed. That sounds brave when written plainly. It was. I stayed because supervisors were supposed to remain until relieved, because police needed statements, because the park's insurance representative kept calling operations, and because every time I considered getting into an ambulance myself, I remembered another detail that seemed important. The jammed restraint, the open locks, the mislabeled breaker, the handwriting under Caesar's mane. By then, the storm had moved east. Rain still dripped from the carousel canopy, but the hard wind was gone. Emergency vehicles filled the employee road behind the ride. Their lights flashed across the wet panels, turning the painted sailboats blue, then red, then blue again. A firefighter wrapped a blanket around my shoulders. "You need to get checked," he said. "I'm fine." He looked at my forearms. Grease had collected in the cuts. My left wrist was swelling where I had driven the maintenance pin into place. Breathing deeply produced a sharp pull beneath my right ribs. You're not fine. I can answer questions sitting down. That isn't the same thing. I sat on an overturned supply crate beside the service fence while a paramedic listened to my lungs and asked whether I had lost consciousness. No. Vomited. No. Headache. Yes. From the fumes or from the day. I don't know. He wrote something on a tablet. Daniel was 10 feet away, refusing treatment because he wanted to ride with Lucy. He could barely put weight on his right leg. When a paramedic tried to guide him toward a wheelchair, he snapped. I said I'm going with her. Renee stepped in front of him. You can go with her after they stabilize your knee. I'm her father. And if you pass out in the ambulance, you become another patient. He looked ready to argue. Then Lucy called from inside the ambulance. Dad. The anger left him so quickly, it made him look older. He allowed them to put him in the wheelchair. As they rolled him past me, he stopped. For a second, I expected an apology or an accusation. He said, she asked if the horse was coming to the hospital. What did you tell her? That it was staying here. That's true, he nodded. Neither of us said thank you. The ambulance doors closed. It pulled away through the service lane at walking speed, avoiding downed cables and standing water. Daniel watched through the rear window until the vehicle turned behind the food warehouse. Renee sat beside me after it was gone. Her uniform pants were soaked to the knees. Mud had dried along one sleeve. You should leave too, she said. So should you. I'm security. I'm operations. Your ride almost killed 4 people. The words were not cruel. That made them worse. I know. She rubbed both hands over her face. For the first time since she arrived, she looked tired instead of controlled. Police are treating it as possible reckless endangerment, she said. Maybe child endangerment. Depends on what Ron admits. Admitted enough. To us. Injured, trapped, possibly hypoxic. He knew the latch was bad. I heard him. He signed it. I heard that too. I pulled the blanket tighter. Across the lane, Tom and Claire worked with county rescue technicians to secure the carousel mechanically. They had placed additional cribbing beneath the frame and chained the drive ring. Nobody trusted the 2 maintenance pins alone. Caesar remained raised above the platform. Without one glass eye, its face looked less alive than before. That helped. A police detective arrived around 6:30. Detective Laura Singh, 43, female, wore a navy rain shell over plain clothes and carried a small audio recorder in one hand. She spoke softly and did not interrupt, which made the interview harder because I heard every gap in my own account. She asked me to begin with the first irregular stop. I told her about the boy in the pirate's cap, the failed belt, the words he used, then Lucy, then Owen in the yellow raincoat. Did you locate Owen? I asked. We're still verifying all children present in that area. That means no. It means we are verifying. His mother called him Owen. He had a stuffed shark. She wrote it down. What made you think the carousel was choosing riders? She asked. I didn't. Your operators. Ethan was unsettled. Was Lucy? Yes. Did Ronald Pike encourage that belief? Apparently. The detective looked toward Caesar. Why that horse? Ron said parents liked it. But why did children recognize the idea of being chosen? I don't know. She waited. I realized she expected more. Maybe he used the same language every time, I said. Kids repeat what adults give them. That's possible. It was the kind of answer investigators used when they had no intention of agreeing yet. She took the red glass eye from me in an evidence bag. I had forgotten. I was still holding it. The glass had left a circular pressure mark in my palm. By 8, the park had been fully evacuated. Management announced closure for the next day due to storm damage. They did not mention the carousel, the injured mechanic, or the child who had been trapped beneath it. An internal email described the event as a weather-related operational incident. I read that line twice on Renee's phone. Weather-related, I said. She took the phone back. They're trying to control information. The weather didn't sign off on a broken restraint. No. The weather didn't run cache photos after hours. No. Then why phrase it like that? You know why? I did. Theme parks sold the feeling that every risk had been considered, measured, padded, bolted down, and painted in cheerful colors. An employee breaking rules was a problem. A damaged system people had ignored was something else. I left the park after 10. A nurse at St. Vincent Hospital cleaned my arms, took chest x-rays, and told me I had 2 bruised ribs, but no fracture. My solvent exposure was mild. They gave me fluids, pain medication, and instructions to return if I developed worsening shortness of breath or confusion. I sat in a curtained bay with an employee wristband still on. Every few minutes, wheels rattled along the corridor. A monitor chimed. Someone coughed behind the curtain beside mine. Ordinary hospital sounds. They made me feel safer than silence would have. Ethan was 2 floors above me in surgery. 2 fingers had been fractured. 1 tendon was partially severed where the gate trapped his hand. The surgeon repaired it, but he would need months of therapy, and nobody could promise full movement. Ron's injuries were worse. His ankle had been crushed beyond reconstruction. Doctors amputated his left leg below the knee the following morning after blood flow failed to return. Lucy was kept overnight for observation. She had a mild concussion from striking her head somewhere beneath the platform, solvent exposure, bruising around one wrist, and a narrow scrape along her back. Physically, she was expected to recover. That phrase appeared in the police report. Physically expected to recover. Daniel had a torn ligament in his knee and 6 stitches in his lip. He was discharged on crutches, but remained at the hospital because Lucy refused to sleep unless he sat where she could see him. I learned most of this from Renee. Management told us not to contact the family directly while the investigation was active. 3 days later, the park placed me on paid administrative leave. The email said it was standard procedure. My access badge stopped working before I had finished reading it. I drove to the employee gate anyway. A temporary security contractor stood in the booth. He did not recognize me. "I work here," I said. "Badge says inactive." "I know." "Then you need to call human resources." Through the fence, I could see the top of the carousel canopy above the midway roofs. Blue tarps had been stretched around the ride, sealing it from public view. The park reopened that morning. Families walked past the tarps carrying lemonades and souvenir cups. The coaster climbed its hill. The anti-rollback teeth cracked under the train. The sound continued exactly as before. I drove home. The investigation lasted 4 months. Ron survived. He initially denied taking money, then changed his statement after police found cash envelopes inside his locker. Each envelope had a date, a child's first name, and an amount written on the front. Some included phone numbers. The list beneath Caesar's name matched many of them. Ron had run the photo arrangement for nearly 3 years. It started with employees' families after closing, then friends, then guests referred by food service workers or game attendants. He charged $10, not $5, despite what he told me inside the machinery bay. He used phrases like, "The horse picked you," and "You're the next rider," as part of the routine. Children were told to wait near the exit gate at assigned times. That explained the repetition. It explained why Lucy understood it. Her family had not paid Ron, but another child at their hotel had told her about the black horse that selected special riders after closing. Lucy saw the markings beneath Caesar's mane during the restraint failure and assumed her name might be there. She returned to look. The cut red strap was also Ron. He had seen the horse tagged from a service camera in the maintenance office. He entered through the rear hatch, came up beneath the platform, and cut the strap through a gap near the pole because he did not want Caesar officially removed before a scheduled photo that evening. He claimed he never saw Lucy climb onto the horse. Police believed that part. The employee gate lock had been damaged 2 weeks earlier by a food delivery driver who snapped a key inside it. A maintenance request existed. Nobody had completed it. The carousel's tendency to stop near the gate came from both Ron's adjustment and a worn brake assembly. The electrical confusion was not one failure, but 7. Undocumented modifications, shared circuits, water intrusion, incorrect labels, generator transfer switch that had failed inspection 6 months earlier and remained in service under a temporary waiver. The restraint buckle had appeared on 2 previous maintenance reports. Both were marked completed. The replacement part was still sealed in a box on a shelf. Ron pleaded guilty to reckless endangerment, falsifying inspection records, and several financial charges related to the cash scheme. The child endangerment charge was reduced as part of the plea. He received prison time, not as much as Daniel wanted. The park paid civil settlements to Lucy's family, Ethan, Ron, and several former employees who joined the case after the electrical records became public. I was not fired. They offered me my position back the following spring. A new title, a raise, additional safety training. I declined. Ethan did return, but not to ride operations. He worked in the guest services office while completing community college. His right ring finger never regained full motion. He joked about it once when we met for coffee. "Could have been worse," he said. "You're allowed to say it was bad." "I know," he flexed the hand. The ring finger curled halfway and stopped. "I just don't like saying things I can't fix." That sounded like him. Daniel sent me one email after the case settled. It contained no greeting. Lucy was in therapy. she slept with her bedroom door open. She did not like mechanical music, dark crawl spaces, or anyone touching her wrist. She had started riding her bicycle again. At the bottom, he wrote, "She knows you came in after her." I read the sentence many times. I never answered. Some messages seemed to ask for a response. That one didn't. The Starlight Galloper was dismantled. Most of the animals were sold at auction to collectors and restaurants. The decorative panels went to a historical preservation group in Ohio. The drive assembly was scrapped. Caesar did not appear in the public auction catalog. The park said the horse had been retained as evidence, then later said it had suffered structural damage during removal and was destroyed. Detective Singh told me the evidence hold had been released. She could not tell me what happened after that. The following summer, I took a job managing facilities at a small municipal recreation center south of Erie. No rides, no crowds large enough to lose a child in. I dealt with clogged pool filters, basketball leagues, broken vending machines, and parents arguing about swim lane reservations. At closing, I checked every locker room twice, sometimes 3 times. The work was ordinary enough that I began to trust it. Then, in October, the recreation center hosted a fall festival. Local businesses set up tables in the gym. Someone brought a portable petting zoo. A vendor rented a small children's carousel for the parking lot, one of those trailer-mounted rides with fiberglass horses, and a recorded calliope loop. I heard the music from my office. My hands stopped over the keyboard. I stayed inside for several minutes before making myself walk out. The carousel was white and blue, clean, modern. The operator wore a reflective vest and checked each belt. Nothing about it resembled Starlight. Children waited behind a temporary fence while parents took pictures. I stood near the recreation center doors, listening to the small electric motor turn. A girl climbed onto a black horse. Not Caesar. This one had a blue saddle and painted brown eyes. Her father fastened the belt. The operator closed the gate. As the ride started, the girl leaned forward and whispered into the horse's ear. A harmless thing. Children talked to toys, animals, decorations. They gave intention to anything with a face. The horse passed me once, twice. On the 3rd rotation, the girl looked directly at me. She pointed. Then she said something to her father. I could not hear it over the music. Her father turned toward me, smiled apologetically, and lifted one hand in a wave. I waved back. The carousel completed its cycle and stopped at a different position from where it began. The operator opened the gate. The girl ran to a table selling caramel apples. Nothing happened. I remained outside until the vendor shut the ride down that evening. After everyone left, I inspected the fence, the power cable, the controls, and the belts. All normal. Under the black horse's mane, there was no writing. I checked twice. Then I locked the recreation center doors and drove home along the lake road. The water was black beyond the guardrail. Wind pushed dry leaves across the pavement in short bursts. At a red light, I noticed something small in the cup holder beside me. A red glass jewel, round, dark on one side. I had not seen it since Detective Singh placed Caesar's eye in an evidence bag picked it up. The underside had a smear of old black paint around the rim. The light changed. A car behind me honked. I set the jewel down and drove. The next morning, it was gone. And that's the end of today's chilling tale. If you enjoyed this story and want more nights full of suspense, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to Mia Horror Stories, and turn on the bell so you never miss a scare. I've got plenty more stories waiting for you, so stick around and check out the other videos on the channel. Thanks for watching, and until next time, stay safe and don't look behind you.